Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto is trained by a hidden miss swordsman for the Chunin exam part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Compared to other villages, one would never see the village hidden in the leaves as cruel. Quite the contrary, in comparison many would see the village as soft and weak, treating its ninja as people instead of tools, and trying for peace, instead of outright taking what they think they deserve. What many people don't know is how Konoha treats one of its own, specifically one Uzumaki Naruto, who could now be found running from yet another mob. One would think the villagers would be done for the day, seeing as a mob similar to the one now chasing the blonde through the streets had earlier beaten the poor 7-year-old to a pulp and then decided to parade his beaten body around the streets by tying him up and bodily dragging him with a sign around his neck saying "Demon Scum." It seems they were going for an evening repeat now, though of course it wasn't the same villagers. No, the other villagers had been arrested. This was a brand new mob. This new mob was taking advantage of a major crime going on across town, which the Anbu usually assigned to guard the young Uzumaki were dealing with. Here is where our story starts. As to where the story goes from this point, we'll all have to see for ourselves. The young 7-year-old Naruto had seen better days, you could tell that just from a glance at him. Wearing a dirty, what used to be blue but had by now turned black from many nights of not being washed, torn shirt with cuts in many places that contrasted the much too big for him baggy and cut up black pants, not to mention the series of bruises and cuts on the skin you could see on him. Through the unfitting shirt you could see he had been underfed. With a physical condition like his it was anyone's guess how the blonde was standing, let alone running from the group chasing him. The blonde hazarded a look behind him, seeing the mob gaining if anything, and he had no hiding areas around here he could use. In a desperate act the 5-year-old tried to push over a trash can, but all that seemed to do was make the villagers behind him even angrier. Running as fast as his little legs would allow, the boy turned towards the one thing that might save him. The village gate. It was a boundary he had never dared cross before, knowing that with everything, he wouldn't die here, Gigi wouldn't let him, but outside the Hokage had no power, and it would just be him and whatever fate decided. Well, this Uzumaki had never believed in foolish luck or fate, and this was the best opportunity to escape pain. So with a mental apology to his adopted grandfather, the Jinchuriki took the turn and sprinted right out the gates, down the path, and then into the trees, soon outpacing the furious cries as he got away from the villagers. Not looking anywhere aside from straight ahead, the boy ran. Not once did he look back, he just ran. Even when the yells were long gone, he still ran. He ran until he could physically run no longer, and by that time he had made it a long ways, farther than he had ever run before. Only then did it set in that he wasn't home, no longer in familiar territory. It was then he began to wonder what he was supposed to do now. This was a situation that was slightly familiar to the blonde, but not out here in the wild. Since he was 3 and until he was 6, the young boy had lived on Konoha streets, living off what he could get out of garbage cans. He knew how it was to not sleep indoors or eat anything but moldy bread. Hell, he still did it since the villagers refused to serve him anything but that when they were forced to allow him to shop there. Soon survival instincts began to kick in then, and slowly the blonde decided first and foremost he needed food and a safe place to stay. So then began the search for a safe resting place. That was essential. If he didn't have a good base of operations, he'd be defenseless against whatever was out here. Before he had a small box, now he would settle for a small cave, anything, before he got food. He'd gone without food before and he'd do so again. Moving through some bushes, the blonde tried his best to find a cave or somewhere to sleep, but was starting to find he could barely see his own hand, let alone a place to rest. That was until he saw a faint light farther down from where he was. Squinting he tried to make out what it was, before his now sleepy and sluggish mind decided light was sometimes good, so it might be okay to investigate. Light usually meant a warm place to stand by for a little bit at least, and he was starting to get chilled from this night. Moving forward he got close and started to smell the scent of cooking meat. Mouth-watering he snuck as quietly as he could forward, peering through some bushes at a seemingly deserted camp. He peered around before his eyes caught the sight of 3 birds cooking over a fire. Looking around quickly, he noticed no one was around and darted out, assuming whoever started to make these was gone now. Unfortunately, as soon as he got into grabbing reach of his prize, he felt something sharp against his neck and stopped mid-lunge. Sliding his eyes down, he saw one of the biggest blades he'd ever imagined. It was literally bigger and wider than he was. Slowly he slid his eyes up the length of the blade and spotted its wielder, glaring down at him behind a mask of bandages with no eyebrows or shirt. The man was well muscled, that much was sure. He also had plenty of scars from battles as far as Naruto could guess, and wore one of those metal headbands he had seen ninja in his village wearing, except this one was different looking and had a slash going through it. Now starting to sweat, the young blonde slowly backed up, or at least started to, only to come to a stop when the blade slid closer as he moved. Catching on that moving was bad, the blonde kept his frightened gaze on the masked man. Finally, after what seemed a lifetime, the man said in a tone of voice that spelled saying the wrong thing would get him killed. "Were you trying to steal my dinner?" The blonde started sweating more, trying to figure out the best answer before deciding on. "I wasn't stealing, I was surviving, and these birds looked a lot better than eating leaves." Lying was too hard for his mind in this situation, frightened and very tired made every thought seem to come from a long way off. Like a whisper of someone 20 feet away. Now the blonde was silently praying his head wasn't going to be chopped off right here when the man looked out of sight to where Naruto couldn't see due to the blade and nodded. Suddenly there was another set of hands on him, grabbing his arms and legs and tying them together. With a shout of protest the blonde fell to the side. Looking up, Naruto saw a girl a little older than him, but noticed only one thing about her. The one thing she voiced out loud. "Zabuza-sama, this boy he has eyes like mine." The girl said quietly, looking up at the bigger man. "He does he? Well then let's see what we have here." The large man, apparently named Zabuza, glared down at the petrified blonde and said. "You've got one chance kid, even that's only because Haku seems to be interested in you. I'm going to ask 2 questions, answer correctly, and you live, incorrectly and your head's mine. We understand each other?" Slowly the last Uzumaki nodded and gulped, hoping that these were really easy questions. If they wanted him to count numbers or something, he was definitely in trouble here. "Good, what's your worst memory?" the man asked, completely serious. Worst memory? "I don't have one," the blonde shakily muttered, looking down. Relieved on one part that it wasn't math, but entirely saddened on a whole different aspect as he looked back on his so far short life. "What do you mean not have one? Everyone has a bad memory. Hell, even a stubbed toe is a bad memory, and judging from the way you're dressed, I can tell your mommy didn't dress you." The demon of the mist growled. Naruto looked down a little more at the mention of having no mother. Boy didn't he know that, he couldn't count how many times he wondered where his mother was, wondering why she wasn't there to hug him like the other kids' moms he had spied from the park, comforting them on the slightest cut. "I don't have a mom, besides, all my memories are kind of the same, waking up, getting those cold looks, wondering what I can find in a trash can, and wondering how bad the next beating will be. The only good thing I had going was Jai-san, but he was always too busy to play with me much," Naruto said sulkily. Zabuza looked down at the blonde and nodded slowly and then asked his final question. "Are you willing to be my tool?" Naruto blinked and then swallowed, glaring up at the large man. No. Remember, I have your life in my hands." Zabuza growled out. "I ran from the village so I would have my own freedom, my own will, and wouldn't have to worry about those damn villagers. I'll be damned if I ran all this way just to surrender to someone else. I'll die free." Naruto yelled, a fire burning in his eyes as he glared at the man. Staring some more, Zabuza slowly raised his blade and Naruto shut his eyes tightly, waiting for the inevitable. Suddenly a whistling noise passed him and the boy blinked, looking around and noticing he could move again. Suddenly a stick was thrust in front of his face, holding a tasty-looking piece of meat. "Eat, you'll need your strength to withstand the hell I have in store for your training," Zabuza said, not even looking at the boy anymore. "Training? What do you mean?" Naruto asked in a very confused tone, already working on devouring his meal. It was a free meal, and he knew better than to pass this up. "I mean, you're going to become my student. I'll need someone to take my place in the 7, and you might do. If not, I can always kill you later." Turning from looking at the fire he barked out. "Haku, you got first shift. Watch the new Gaki and see if you can analyze him like I've been trying to teach you. Do it correctly and you might get breakfast." The girl who had silently watched until now nodded and turned to the blonde, waiting for her master to head to his tent. "I'm Haku, tool to Zabuza-sama." The blonde simply blinked and offered a fake smile. "Uzumaki Naruto, tool to no one." Suddenly their introductions were cut off when from the tent a kunai flew, severing a few pieces of the Uzumaki hair. "Shut up or I'll decapitate both of you." Haku giggled slightly at the blonde's frightened look and said, "Welcome to your new home." "Why yeah, still not sure if that's a good or bad thing." His only reply to that statement was a small giggle from the girl as she walked towards the fire. Meanwhile in Konoha, an aged Hokage was staring at his crystal ball dully as he watched the picture fuzzily, having traced the blonde since he left, the picture getting dimmer and dimmer and requiring more and more chakra as the blonde got farther away from the village. In truth the aged man had wanted to go and fetch the boy himself to protect him from the village, but knew he couldn't. The council had already cut off all his attempts to save the child, and if he tried to do so now he just might be put in a position as to where he could never help the blonde. Instead the aged professor looked down in contemplation before smiling to himself, a plan devising in his mind. He may not be able to help the blonde now, at least physically, but he could ensure Naruto had a place to come back to. Seeing as Naruto was not a shinobi when he left, the blonde would indeed have a place to return to. So instead of sending out Anbu to retrieve the boy, he would give Naruto a chance to live outside of Konoha, and if he so wished it, he could always come back to this village and be welcomed, at least by the Hokage. With a quiet sigh, the third pulled his hat down and sent one last prayer. Be safe Naruto-kun, and please come back to us. A dark shadow hovered over a sleeping figure and all was silent throughout the area. Or it was until the shadow figure made a fluent motion and the sleeping figure was shocked awake, freezing and soaked where he had fallen asleep against a tree. The sputtering figure blinked and stared up at the figure that had thrown the water and glared. What the hell was that for? Naruto yelled indignantly as Zabuza smirked behind his mask, moving off to the side. That brat was for sleeping in late. Zabuza replied as he sat down next to what used to be the campfire. Sleeping in late, it's my day off, you ass. Naruto replied while giving the bandaged man a death glare that to many, it would send dark chills through their spine. Your point? I told you the same thing last month, you get 1 day off a month, but that doesn't mean you get to slack off when it counts. I could have been an enemy and now where would you be? Zabuza asked, absently polishing his blade as he looked at Naruto with an uncaring glaze in his eyes. Naruto's mouth opened and closed a few times like a dying fish before he simply huffed and turned away, muttering about stupid eyebrowless senseis and their inability to be human for a day. As he was muttering, another figure entered the clearing and stifled a giggle at the sight of the soaked blonde pouting off to the side. Turning to her master, she asked. You used the bucket again, didn't you, Zabuza-sama? When she got a grunt in reply and Naruto sending a scathing glare at the man, she actually let out the giggle she had held in before. This was routine pretty much on Naruto's days off and had been for the past 5 years. It actually still surprised a fake hunter nin that Naruto had been with them for so long. It's still like yesterday they found the little blonde boy wandering into their camp. Since that day life had been insanely hectic, but in a good way. The blonde brightened up Haku's life since he had joined their small family. Actually, they had brightened up each other's life as far as Haku was concerned. She knew of Naruto's life before he joined them and still felt the same small pangs of anger and sadness when she remembered Naruto explaining where he came from. Flashback: 3 figures sat around a small burning campfire, 2 simply staring at the flames while the other cleaned a rabbit with ease as he looked to one of the figures staring at the fire. Oi, brat, it's about time you explain some more about yourself. That figure started with a blink of surprise and then turned to his new sensei. Like what? Like where you came from and why you fled from homeboy and where you plan on going from here. Zabuza grunted, giving the 7-year-old an annoyed glare for having to explain himself. Naruto immediately smiled and proclaimed. Life wasn't so bad, I mean it was, and he was cut off as he gulped at the blade at his neck. Stop bullshitting me and drop that stupid act, kid. Being happy is one thing, forcing that idiotic smile will just piss me off, and do you really want me pissed off? Zabuza asked with a deadly glint in his eye. The blonde immediately shook his head, the oversized cleaver was taken away from his throat. Gulping and patting his neck to make sure it was all still there, Naruto let out a breath and slowly closed his eyes before beginning. I came from Konoha, my life was hell there. I was beaten frequently by villagers whenever they felt like it, and they always glared at me with those cruel eyes like I was something they scraped off their shoe. I could never get any food unless I went to old man Ichiraku's for ramen, but I stopped after a while when I saw some villagers try and spray paint on the stand. I didn't want to cause them any trouble. The blonde sniffed and shook his head, refusing to let the tears that had threatened to start falling come out. He had learned long ago that crying wouldn't help him. Suddenly an arm wrapped around his neck from behind and Naruto's eyes went wide as he turned to see who held him. To his surprise, it was Haku, smiling down comfortingly. It's okay Naruto-kun, let it out, you're not alone anymore. You can finally let it all out. Haku whispered, and in seconds the boy's resolve to not cry was broken as he latched himself to Haku as if she were his only life preserver in a raging ocean. While the boy cried, Haku simply comforted him as best she could, all the while realizing she had found a kindred spirit like hers. As he cried, Haku softly whispered. We're a lot like Naruto-kun. I know what you're going through exactly. Let me tell you about what happened before Zabuza-sama found me. And as the boy cried, Haku softly told her tale. About her bloodline, about the purge, about being homeless and without use until her master found her. When she had finished, the blonde was no longer crying but staring at the fire with a glossy look in his eyes. Zabuza watched his 2 charges with hidden emotion, turning away after a while until they were both done crying, seeing as halfway through her own story, Haku had started crying with the blonde, and after she had finished they had both cried just because they had finally found someone like themselves. Turning back when it was quiet, he voiced a question to the glossy-eyed 7-year-old. You still haven't told us what you're planning on doing from here. Zabuza said, with an uncharacteristically soft voice. The glassy gaze shattered in an instant, replaced with a burning fire of conviction that slightly startled Haku as the boy voiced himself with full determination. I'm going to train as hard as I can and become strong enough to show those villagers what I'm worth. I'll earn all their respect and then I'll protect every single one of them by becoming the Hokage. I swear on my life." Zabuza smiled behind his bandaged face and said. "I don't know why you would want to go back to that hellhole, but I'll make damn sure you're strong, brat. Just remember to send some cash my way, Hokage-sama." The title was for once not said sarcastically, probably being the one time in a long while Zabuza would treat anyone as equal. "No problem, sensei. I'll send loads of money your way." Naruto replied with a genuine grin across his face. As Haku smiled behind him, silently vowing to help the blonde on his way to becoming Hokage. Then flashback, Haku was shaken from her thoughts as a hand waved in front of her face, and she blinked a few times to look into the slightly concerned eyes of one Uzumaki Naruto. "Yo, you okay, Haku? You kind of spaced there for a while." Naruto asked, and to her surprise her lack of concentration had been longer than she thought, seeing as the blonde was dressed with his blade already on his hip. That was one of the things Zabuza changed first, Naruto's horrible clothing. At once they set out and bought him some new clothing. That proved disastrous when the two almost broke out into a fight about Naruto wearing orange. Eventually the two came to a compromise due to not being able to move their legs, thanks to some well-placed senbon, which allowed Naruto to have an orange thing on him. The which Naruto chose a dark orange pair of wristbands that concealed his training weights. The rest of his outfit came with a dark black shirt with a red spiral on the back, hidden under a blue, borderline black, trench coat that had only the top two buttons buttoned, opening up to reveal baggy black and blue camo pants with tons of pockets. Zabuza's insistence that his disciple looked something like him and Naruto refusing to shave off his eyebrows. The look was completed by Naruto getting a sword that suited him, which actually turned to be a modified katana, that when chakra was added to it, it separated into two separate blades, but shorter than the original katana. Over the years Naruto grew his hair out slightly in a ponytail that ended at his shoulder, but his blonde hair being usually covered in a black bandana. Haku smiled down at the blonde boy with a shake of her head. "Sorry, Naruto-kun. I'm just fine. Just a bit out of it today." Naruto shrugged and nodded. "Gotcha, so did you hear, no brow? We have a new mission to take out some old drunken bridge builder. Apparently it's gonna bring in a whole lot of money. So maybe I can convince the bastard to get us a hotel next time we're in a town." Haku giggled and shook her head. "Then we better get ready and get going, you know how master gets when we don't start moving when he wants us to. Hey you two. Stop flirting with each other and pack up." The two blushed and Naruto quickly sent a glare at his sensei. "We weren't flirting, you jerk. Whatever, before you two start making out, get your things in a bag and start moving your asses or I'm leaving you here," Zabuza said, inwardly enjoying tormenting the two. With a grumble from Naruto and a silent blush from Haku, the two set about getting their things together before leaving with their sensei master to start their mission. Meanwhile, in Konoha an aged Hokage rubbed his temples as he looked at the team before him. It had been a few months since the new generation had graduated the Shinobi Academy and already this team was requesting a more difficult mission. Before the aging Hokage stood Team 7 consisting of Hada Kakashi, Uchiha Sasuke, Haruno Sakura, and Inyazuka Kiba, so far the best of the teams in consistency of getting their missions done, but even so they were fresh out of the academy. Doubt crossed the Hokage's mind as he shifted through his mission stacks to buy time on his decision. As he was shifting through them though, a single one caught his eye and the Hokage blinked and smiled. This was perfect for the group before him. Looking up the Hokage nodded and stated, "Alright then, a C-rank mission it is. Team 7 you now have an escort mission to Wave, escorting a bridge builder." The reactions before him were amusing to say the least, as Kakashi was surprised enough to actually look up from his perverted book Sasuke, and Sakura looked at Kiba with emotions ranging from annoyance, well mainly annoyance, as the primal shinobi did a victory dance. But Hokage-sama the Chunin Iruka said beside him before Sarutobi gently waved his hand to cut him off. "They'll be fine, Iruka," was all the Hokage offered as he motioned for the escort to be shown in. The bridge builder, who went by the name of Tazuna, walked in and was obviously drunk as he measured Team 7 and yelled, "Hey. I wanted a team, you gave me some Cyclops, an emo, a girl who obviously dyes her hair to fit in, and some kid who smells like he hasn't bathed in days." Each of Team 7 turned to glare at the client, Kiba going as far as trying to stab the man with a kunai before Kakashi escorted the team and client out. Sarutobi watched it all, smiling and wishing the team luck. They certainly were going to need it. If only Sarutobi knew how much. It was half a day later and Naruto was grumbling, sitting in a bush as he was sent to wait and ambush the bridge builder they were hired to kill. According to Zabuza he was apparently supposed to do this by himself unless there was someone he couldn't handle. Naruto simply pegged it as the man being too damn lazy and wanting some good money without having to do much. Suddenly the feeling of 4 chakra signatures came to the blonde. Shinobi. According to Gato the bridge builder shouldn't have been able to hire shinobi, just bandits. Damn lying greedy bastard. They better get a damn bonus for this. Watching from his bush, he watched a team come around the corner and sized them up, wondering if he was going to be able to pull out a sneak attack or not. His eyes landed on their Jounin sensei, and immediately his planning went to hell. Freaking Sharingan Kakashi. This sucked big time. Cursing under his breath, Naruto blinked in shock before instinctively replacing himself with their raised rabbit as a kunai hit the spot his head was, thanks to the kid with a dog on his head. Arriving next to the cage and looking at his sensei and Haku, Naruto performed the wordless hand signals he was taught, informing them on the situation. All Zabuza did was nod before smirking and hefting his blade, throwing it. As he vanished after it and Naruto hearing the screams of "get down" as the scene beside him and Haku unfolded, he turned to her and rolled his eyes, mouthing the word "show off," causing the girl to giggle behind her hunter mask. Turning to watch the fight between Jounin, Naruto blinked and watched Kakashi get lured into a simple trap. Maybe he overestimated the Konoha Jounin. He didn't wait to wonder if he had or not, as Zabuza signaled for him to get their target while he had Kakashi. Naruto blinked slightly and smirked, nodding even though he couldn't be seen. Without making a single noise, the blonde swordsman vanished and reappeared in between the protective formation of the three genin, his hand on the hilt of his katana. His smirk widened as the genin with the dog on his head yelped in surprise, while the pink-haired girl gasped openly. The black-haired kid only tensed though, good to see one was slightly serious. He turned to the horrified old man and shrugged, saying in a bored monotone voice. "Sorry old man, nothing against you or your village, but we need the cash." With that his blade slid forward faster than most could comprehend, seemingly turning into a blur to the genin. When instead of the easily tear-through resistance of flesh and the sound of skin being split by a blade was replaced with the force of another blade and the sound of metal clashing, Naruto's eyes widened. Instead of his blade severing the head of the bridge builder, it was being blocked by two kunai, straining to hold his one blade from their awkward positioning. Following the arm holding the kunai, Naruto raised an eyebrow at the face of the black-haired boy screwed up in concentration. Suddenly the raven-haired Avenger shifted his weight, sliding on of the kunai towards the hilt of Naruto's blade, while he threw the second kunai with a flick of his wrist. Naruto brought his blade down, towards the ground as he simply bent his neck to dodge the kunai. After dodging, the blonde stepped back and disengaged blades while sending a kick forward towards the Konoha shinobi's head. Sasuke grit his teeth as he blocked the jarring kick by raising his left arm, rolling with the impact, and coming to a standing position a few feet away. He spun quickly, glaring heatedly at the blonde before him who simply looked bored. "Was that supposed to impress me?" The blonde drawled, his sunny persona shifting further behind his shinobi personality. It was something Zabuza had taught him to do during his first year of training, stating that his loud and overconfident personality would get him killed. He said a good shinobi kept his emotions behind him, only out of battle or a mission was he allowed to be himself, on the field he was simply a shinobi. Nothing more, nothing less, until he had the power to achieve his dreams. After that Zabuza had said he could honestly care less what the blonde did. Sasuke growled more in anger, unknowingly playing right into the blonde's hands by taking the bait and getting more emotional. Just as he was about to charge again, he was stopped by a voice, the voice of their captured teacher. "What are you doing? He's obviously been trained by Zabuza, he's too strong for you. Get yourselves and Tazuna out of here," Kakashi yelled. Suddenly the frozen Kiba broke out of his stupor and shook his head defiantly, growling alongside his partner Akamaru. "No way, Kakashi-sensei. You taught us that those who abandon their mission are trash, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than trash. There's no way we're leaving you behind. There is only one of him and three of us, we'll take him down and get you out of there in no time. And Inyazuka never abandons their pack." Zabuza simply laughed. "Let the kids play, Kakashi, I want to test my student." Kakashi simply glared, about to protest again when Kiba took action. "Beast human clone no jutsu." I wrote this chapter without internet, as will most of my chapters be typed, so bear with me please. I know some jutsu off the top of my head, but not many. Everyone turned towards the feral shinobi to find not one, but two of him. Both were on all fours and as one shot forward, attacking the blonde in perfect synchronization and finesse. One Kiba jumped off the other's back, slicing at the blonde as he sailed over him, while the other jumped forward and started spinning using chakra, the other Kiba doing the same once he hit the ground on the other side of him. There was a chorused shout of Gatsuuga. As the two spinning forms took on a look of bouncing grey drills. Naruto's eyebrows shot up as he started backpedaling, flipping backwards to avoid one drill, as it smashed into the ground he was on not a second before, making a small crater as the other drill flew up, on a course to shred into the blonde. Turning in the air, Naruto brought his blade up, reinforcing it with chakra and tensing his muscles, knowing this was going to be slightly difficult. The drill slammed into his blade, pushing it toward him centimeter by centimeter before with a grunt Naruto forced his blade down with all his strength, sending the drill down, on course with a rather large rock. The drill slammed into it, tearing apart half of it before stopping in a puff of smoke, revealing an unconscious and slightly beaten white dog. Naruto landed and spun just in time to hear an enraged howl before the other drill increased its speed, tripling its force. Eyes widening, Naruto jumped back, dodging the drill just barely, the front of his shirt ripping, while 3 shallow cuts formed on his chest. Just as he landed from his slight jump, the swordsman ducked, dodging the enraged Konohan in once more by centimeters. Gritting his teeth, the blonde finally had enough of this as with 2 hand seals, a vortex of water sprung up, forming another Naruto. Together with his clone, Naruto waited for the drill to turn, and when it was as close as it could get and they could still dodge, they both stepped wide to either side of it, bringing the blades, sharpened slightly by chakra, to slash the drill's side. There was a pained groan as the drill deformed in midair, twin twirling arcs of blood spinning along with the falling Inuzuka. The dog shinobi hit the ground hard, rolling to a stop with shallow cuts going down both of his arms. They could still be moved, but it would cause a load of pain until they healed. Sighing in relief at that problem being taken care of, Naruto's eyes widened slightly as he felt a build-up of chakra behind him before he heard a yell. Grand Fireball Jutsu. Without thinking, the blonde ran forward with his top speed, blurring to everyone except the Jounin and Haku, who was watching from the bushes. Outrunning the distance the fireball could travel and running around the pink-haired girl, grabbing her and throwing her at the Uchiha, grinning as she slammed into him and caused him to choke on his fire, coughing up smoke. Naruto looked to his sensei and smirked but blinked in surprise at what he was seeing. The 2 Jounin were talking as if nothing was going on. "So you took him in after he left, eh?" Kakashi asked, looking at the man while sitting cross-legged in his prison, knowing he was trapped and accepting it would take a miracle to save him. "Yeah. He is now my apprentice." Zabuza replied, knowing Naruto would handle the rest. "You want to make a deal?" Kakashi asked. "You're not really in a position to make deals right now, copy ninja." The demon of the mist growled. Before Kakashi could say more, a blade flashed down between the 2 men. The prison was released and a raging Naruto stood between them. He glared at his sensei. "I kick their asses and you don't even watch, you bastard sensei." Zabuza smirked and threw Naruto onto shore once more. "You took too long. I have to now recapture Kakashi thanks to you." His tone was irritated, but it was easy to see he was excited to fight more. Kakashi glared at the man, knowing his deal would have to be put off until he defeated Zabuza. Naruto grumbled and sat down, watching the Jounin in boredom. At least until Kakashi started doing some weird things. He seemed to be able to read Zabuza's mind. Suddenly Zabuza was in a position to be killed and Naruto's eyes were wide. At least until Haku intervened. Naruto chose that moment when all attention was on her to make his escape into the mist, knowing they would all meet at Gato's headquarters. Naruto arrived at the meeting place close to 20 minutes later than Haku. When he came into the room, spotting Zabuza being fussed over by Haku, he walked over, grumbling about really needing to be taught the Shushin Jutsu. Both Zabuza and Haku knew it, but he didn't. It just wasn't fair. Looking down at his sensei, Naruto raised an eyebrow at the state he was in. "He's going to be trouble, isn't he?" Naruto asked out loud, not really addressing a specific person. "If you're speaking about the copy ninja, he's mine. I figured out his little parlor trick. Too bad you couldn't have figured that out before you got your ass handed to you," the blonde said, snickering slightly. Before Zabuza could retort, Haku had a senbon and a pressure point on both their jaws, making them hang open. She smiled sweetly before saying, "You 2 weren't going to fight, were you?" They both quickly shook their heads no, so fast they could have had whiplash. Haku just nodded before taking the senbon. "Both of you rest, I'm going to look at what I can and grab some herbs later. You should be up in a week, Zabuza-sama." "Good, then we attack the bridge as soon as I'm at full power," Zabuza said from his position on the bed, closing his eyes. "Need some help then, Haku-chan?" Naruto asked with a slight smile, knowing he had nothing better to do. "Your help would be nice, Naruto-kun, thank you." With that, they went off to rest, deciding the next day to grab their sensei's medicine. Naruto leaned against a tree, watching from above as Haku gathered herbs. He would be down there with her, but she convinced him not to. The team from Konoha had seen him and would definitely recognize him if they were around, she had much less chance of being found. So instead he was watching over her in case of trouble. Blinking, he watched her happen upon the dog boy of Team 7, who just woke up. On guard, he watched a scene between the 2 unfold, waiting for something to happen. Instead, the boy simply asked to help her with her gathering after they had a brief conversation. Raising an eyebrow, Naruto smirked. If Konoha shinobi were truly this easily fooled, any mission against them in the future was sure to be a breeze. After Haku had her herbs and they parted company, Naruto dropped down next to her and smiled. "Precious people, huh? I like that. How come I've never heard of it before? I thought it was silly." Haku mumbled with a slight blush. Naruto smiled. "Silly? No way. I think that will become my new nindo, to protect my precious people, my way of the shinobi." Haku blinked in surprise and then smiled slightly, looking down. Silently thanking the blonde for accepting what she had said. Hey Haku. Yes, Naruto-kun. You're one of my few precious people and no matter what I'll protect you. He said, fully serious as she looked at her. Haku, touched and embarrassed, nodded quickly and quietly as they went on their way. Oddly enough, until Zabuza was better, Naruto didn't see Haku at all for the rest of the week. He thought nothing of it, truly oblivious to everything. This past week had been tedious for a certain ice wielder. Between taking care of Zabuza and avoiding Naruto, she had little time to herself. Thinking of the blonde, the ice user let out a sigh and shook her head, irritated at herself. She was behaving like some weak little village girl instead of the shinobi she was. He said one touching thing, and suddenly she was blushing and wondering about her feelings for him. Sure, she knew she had a crush on the blonde, but she figured it would pass. Instead he did things like that, and Haku's crush grew bigger. Now she was even questioning if her feelings were starting to rival her gratitude to her master, but she knew she owed Zabuza a deal more. Naruto wasn't as big as that, but with the strides he was taking. Shaking her head one more time she mentally berated herself. This was why she had to avoid the blonde, he always brought up these distracting thoughts now. Still, she would do everything physically to help the blonde that would never change. The boy was one of her precious people as well after all. Suddenly a voice from the room next to her called for her and blinking, Haku walked through the doorway wondering what her master wanted. Blinking in surprise when he wasn't in bed, she saw him picking up his blade. Zabuza-sama, you're not fully recovered yet. She said sternly, moving toward him. He always ignored her medical advice. The man simply shrugged and looked at her over his shoulder. I'm fine and I'm sick of sitting here. Stop avoiding Blondie and grab him, we're heading to the bridge to end this. Haku simply sighed in resignation. If there was one thing she knew it was that when her master decided he was better, there was no amount of talking or action less than physically disabling him that would convince him otherwise. So with a nod she turned and walked from the room, knocking on the door that led to Naruto's sleeping quarters. She blinked when she heard a scuffle behind the door and some yelling and glared at the door, moving with shinobi instinct and kicking the door in, senbon in each hand, posed to launch them at any assailant in the area. Instead she was met with the sight of Naruto, clad only in boxers, tangled up in sheets and blankets, upside down with said boxers dangerously close to being revealing. Both teens' eyes met for an instant before Naruto tried to escape his sheets with more passion and Haku turning away, her face as red as a tomato. This was not helping her confusing thoughts any. Frantically she tried to find something, anything, to distract herself from the sight she had seen. Finally Naruto had righted himself, untangled from the blanket, and blushingly looked away. This was one of the worst ways he could think of to start the day. He decided to res a bit more today, and now Haku had caught him like that. Moving nervously from foot to foot, the blonde tried to laugh his way out of the situation. Hey, Haku-chan. Do you need something? Naruto asked, embarrassment obvious in his voice. Haku forced herself to look the boy in the eyes and nod briefly. Zabuza-sama is awake and well, we're heading out very soon so you should get ready to leave. Naruto blinked a few times before grinning and jumping into the air, pumping his fist. Yes. Finally we can get the hell out of this boring place and do something interesting. I can wait to fight some more. Naruto exclaimed, running to his pack and throwing dirty clothes haphazardly around the room before finding a relatively clean one. Without thinking he was about to start changing before he heard a scream of his name and a door being slammed. Looking back and blinking, he saw the spot where Haku had been empty. Shrugging, the blonde started changing once more, oblivious to the black-haired girl outside his room, cursing the Uzumaki swordsman for making things so damn awkward before heading to her own room. She had a battle to prepare for. When Naruto was finally out of his room, he found both Haku and Zabuza gone. His eyes widened and he cursed, damn them for leaving him here. They were gonna take all the good opponents for themselves now. Opening the window next to him, the blonde blasted out of the room, heading on a reckless course to the bridge. When he was getting close, he noticed that a mist had formed and was getting thicker as he got closer to the bridge. Damn, he needed to speed up now, or he wouldn't have anyone to fight when he got there. With that in mind he went even faster, sending small pumps of chakra to his legs. On the bridge, Team 7 had just arrived, spotting the unconscious bodies of the workers under Tezuna's command. Immediately Team 7 went into a defensive formation, Kakashi standing in front of them all. Suddenly two figures appeared before them, Zabuza was back and so was the hunter Nin who took him from death. All the members of Team 7 immediately noticed there was a missing member of the team from the missing shinobi. Kakashi smiled at the two, trying to pull in friendly, hoping that before they fought he could mention this deal of his. Konnichiwa, Zabuza, Hunter Nin-san. I was wondering if you'd be willing to talk for a moment. First, where is Uzumaki-san, and is there any way you could possibly, just join Konoha with him? The only way you're getting the Gaki is over my dead body, copy Nin. Now stop talking and fight. Zabuza said with a smirk before sending a water clone at the genin guarding the bridge builder, knowing the brats wouldn't be able to handle it. To his immense surprise though, one of the genin sped up and took his clone unawares, landing a fatal blow. Seems like the black-haired runt has speed. Zabuza muttered with a smirk. Haku nodded, fully in her shinobi persona. So it seems, allow me to deal with him Zabuza-sama. Haku said, taking on Senbin. The Uchiha simply smirked before pulling out a kunai and meeting the ice user in the middle of a large puddle. We're matched. The raven-haired Avenger said smugly, smirking as they spun once more, and he once again met the Hunter Nin's needle with his blade. Not quite genin. Haku said coolly, using some one-handed hand seals and sending a barrage of ice needles at the boy. He simply hopped out of the way and Haku followed, their battle flowing farther down bridge, before Haku decided to make this quick and pull her blood limit out. Kakashi and Zabuza watched them take off, Kakashi nodding seriously. It'll be a close fight. He commented, turning to keep his eyes on the missed swordsman. Zabuza simply smirked. Haku has it in the bag, once she uses her blood limit, your Gaki is in trouble. Kakashi's eye widened and he was about to run to help when Zabuza vanished into the mist. You run to help him and I kill the other two and the bridge builder, your choice. Zabuza said, his laugh echoing all around. Blaring Kakashi moved his headband up and looked to his two remaining students, one who looked scared witless, while the other simply seemed a bit angry. Cover Tazuna, don't let anything happen to him. With that he took off into the mist, leaving the two genin alone. Biba growled and sighed as he felt the gentle muzzling of his partner on his head. He turned to Sakura and smirked. Relax, we'll be fine. The other kid's not here and Kakashi-sensei had that Zabuza. His words did little to reassure Sakura, but at least he could say he tried. She was scared stiff, well he was just irritated. Sasuke, the Uchiha prick, actually managed to get someone to fight while he was sitting on the sidelines. Honestly he wanted the other guy to come back, he wanted to repay him for what he did to him and his partner. The blonde prick would pay before he did what Kakashi instructed them to do and captured the blonde, taking him with them to Konoha. As if his prayers were answered, a form dropped from nothing revealing the blonde swordsman looking at them unimpressed. Kiba was slightly pissed at that look and was about to attack when the other boy's head dropped. Blinking in confusion his enhanced hearing could make out the whisper of he was always getting stuck with the horrible opponents. Kiba's confusion vanished and was replaced with fury. The familiar seals his partner was in his clone form and both Kibas growled. Treat us like nothing will you? We're gonna kick your ass from here to Konoha. With that the two charged, following the laughing blonde as he dodged claw sweeps, leaving a poor Sakura all alone with the bridge builder. Sasuke was starting to get pissed. Actually, he was already there, but now he was getting desperate. After they moved out of eyesight of the Jounin, the shinobi he was facing did this odd jutsu and then vanished into one of the many mirrors in this new dome he was trapped in. Not only that, but this ice seemed to be impervious to his Kaiten jutsu. Now he had a few needles sticking out of everywhere and was desperately trying to find a way out of this, barely getting by with the skin of his teeth. Suddenly another wave of senbin rained down and he blocked as many as he could, skidding back and panting as he stopped moving. Charging forward he started hand seals for another grand fireball when something happened. Things seemed to slow down for him. He blinked, seeing senbin heading for him and knowing exactly where they were going. With quick maneuvering, he blocked every one of them. Behind her mask, Haku's eyes widened as one of his fastest senbin strikes was blocked with a sudden ease. She tried to find what changed with her opponent and immediately saw his eyes and curse. It seemed the raven-haired boy had some kind of dijutsu and while it was still undeveloped, it might give him a new edge to this fight. She had to try and end this fast. Sasuke knew the other sensed something off because immediately barrage after barrage of senbin at him, faster and even more deadly than before. Still, whatever had happened before was still going on because he actually was managing to dance in and out of the raining senbin needles, blocking where he needed and getting far fewer cuts than he had before. Unfortunately he was purely on defense right now, so until the other shinobi slipped up or ran out of chakra, he wouldn't be able to attack. He didn't have to wait long. While this attack had finished off many shinobi in the past, it also zapped a lot of Haku's chakra, so now with that in mind, Haku started to get desperate and was a little slower in moving from mirror to mirror, and the Uchiha capitalized on that fact, hitting her leg with a fireball and tripping her up. In the process of her falling, her mirrors began to fall as well. Before she could even hit the ground the Uchiha clothes lined her falling form, sending her crashing into the ground and skidding to a stop against a wall. She pushed herself up when a kunai was placed against her neck. She froze and looked through her mask at the Uchiha's cold red eyes and then closed hers, knowing she was in trouble and Zabuza and Naruto were too far away to help with this one. But the final thought she resigned herself to this fate, regretting she hadn't been able to help Naruto or her master and for not sorting out all those feelings. Goodbye, Naruto-kun. At first this fight had seemed funny to Naruto. He knew the boy's skills, having fought him before, but now he was starting to get a little annoyed. Apparently the two had been working on teamwork because Naruto simply couldn't get a moment to catch his bearings. Every time he touched down on the ground, he was moving again, and when he jumped left, there was another drill there, and when he ran right, there was the other. At the moment he knew that the others had their fights going on, he could sense Haku's domes, and the two Jounin were easy to pinpoint, but he didn't know how they were faring, and that worried him. He knew they could handle themselves, but Haku had her blood limit up for a while now, and that was bad. He knew firsthand how destructive that Jutsu could be, having it been used on him to practice his speed evasion training, but he also knew she couldn't keep it up for long. Whoever she was facing had to be good. Landing from another jump, Naruto leaned back at an almost 90-degree angle before turning his motion into a backhand spring as he dodged another dog bullet. Tensing his arms lower than normal, he shot high and quickly drew his blade, deciding he needed to go on the offense. Landing, the boy sprinted forward, throwing himself forward and placing a hand on the ground and pushing off, giving himself more speed and an opposite rotation of the canine torpedoes. Adding chakra to his push, he made a crude bladed version and met head-on, his blades crossed before him, with one of the drilling shinobi. The collision made a large exploding sound from the colliding chakra forces before the two flung apart in opposite directions, one of the kibas landing in a daze, while Naruto rolled to his feet, slightly dizzy but still combat ready. It was good that he was too, because the blonde was moving quickly after standing, dodging the drill that was desperate to pick up the slack. It was times like these he hated Zabuza for not teaching him more cool Kikis jutsu. He could use one of those cool water dragons to take them both down, but all in the ways of jutsu that he knew was simply the water clone, henge, kawamari, and some elemental manipulation. He for his chakra in different ways around his blade and knew decently how to mess with water, but he knew nothing beside that. Zabuza said the best shinobi and swordsmen made their own forms, which included jutsu. The Uzumaki knew for a fact that lazy bastard didn't make up his own jutsu. After this he promised himself he'd kick Zabuza's ass until he taught him some cool jutsu. Taking his mind off that, the blonde decided to do what he did best and improvise. So vanishing into the mist temporarily, Naruto made 20 water clones, and they all fanned out. The drill seemed to slow before starting to attack the running Narutos, while the original made his way to the stunned Kiba regaining his senses. Grabbing him by the coat, the blonde held one of his two blades to his neck and yelled for the other drill. "Boy. Unless you want him gutted, I'd suggest you stop." The other drill stopped, landing on another clone and making it vanish by landing on it mid-jump. The Kiba gave a slight whine before the one being held by the blade shouted. "Drill right through me and hit this bastard Akamaru. We can't let this village down." Naruto blinked in shock, his shinobi persona falling slightly. "What is in this village that would make you lay down your life for it?" Naruto asked the same question Zabuza had asked him when Naruto said one day he would go back to Konoha. "It doesn't matter what is in this village. These people are suffering and you're helping the bastard who's doing it. I'll lay my life down to make all these people's lives better, and this bridge will do it," Kiba said fiercely, glaring over his shoulder. For a moment Naruto let his true self shine through as he grinned brightly. "Good answer. It's kind of like why I'm going to go back and protect my home, whether those damn villagers want me to or not." With that he was about to move one of his clones to tie the boy up when he suddenly got a very bad feeling about something that was going to happen. Turning his head in the direction of the bad feeling and his eyes widened. Just barely visible he could see the form of a kneeling Haku, about to have a kunai slice across her throat. Naruto dropped his blade and started sprinting, knowing he was too far away, but knowing he had to get there to save her. He had promised he would protect her, his precious person. His eyes focused on the falling blade and Naruto closed his eyes, tears falling slightly as he moved his fastest, and suddenly he felt himself falling down a dark deep hole before softly landing in a large puddle. Opening his eyes, he looked around in confusion, wondering where exactly he was. What had happened to the bridge? Frowning, he felt a pull down a certain hallway and simply followed the pull, taking many twists and turns before arriving before a large cage. On the cage, an oversized piece of paper sat before him with the word seal written on it. This was odd. Before he could ponder this any longer, two large red eyes opened before him and a feral grin, with sharp teeth each the size of him, flashed out at him. "So, you have finally come," a dark rumbling voice rang out from behind the bars. "Finally come? Who the hell are you and where am I?" Naruto asked loudly, glaring at the large form behind the bars. "Earn yourself, and as to who am I am the great Kyuubi no Kitsune. Show some respect." The demon, now identified as the Kyuubi, grumbled. "Kyuubi? Yeah, and I'm the Tooth Fairy. If we're in me, why the hell are you in me?" Naruto asked, still glaring, wanting to return back to the bridge, he needed to save Haku. "I was sealed in you by the leader of your village, I believe he called himself the fourth Hokage. Don't you wonder why the villagers hated you?" "Me, for that I do apologize, but I do know more than that." Just because your life was shit, I owe you nothing. Kyuubi said with a growl. You bastard. Naruto yelled in rage. You're the reason I was hated, why everyone gave me those cold stares, but I should thank you because of you, I would never have grown up and found Zabuza-sensei and Haku. So bastard fox, I thank you, now send me back before I kick your ass. Naruto said, giving the demon a level stare. Why am I here anyway? You need my help. You need my power. Before he could finish, the Uzumaki swordsmen interrupted. Screw that. I'll get by on my own power, not riding the coattails of someone else. Naruto growled. The demon glared before freezing the boy with killer intent. Show me respect, hairless ape. I may be sealed, but you should know your place. Still, your outlook on this intrigues me. So, I will do something else instead, but in doing this you owe me a favor. I will unlock your hidden bloodline, it should help in this. Do you accept? Naruto glared at the demon, struggling to move under all the killer intent directed at him, before letting out a breath and thinking it over. What's the favor, and I want to know more about this sealing and everything else. I would scream at you now, but Haku-chan needs me. I'll call upon the favor when the time is right, until then you must grow stronger. As for the seal, if the copy ninja still lives, ask him. It was his sensei who did this after all. Kyuubi replied, waiting for the answer still. Naruto thought for a few more moments before looking up at the kitsune and simply nodding. Do it, allow me to protect my precious person. The demon smirked and sent a flash of Yoki through the boy's system. It's done. The Hirshin is now yours to wield, you'll have to figure out how it works on your own, but it should work in this situation. Now go boy, time is short. But that final word from the demon, the boy felt himself thrown from his mind and back into the world of the present. Naruto's eyes opened and his eyes focused on the blade once more, it's still falling, but this time something was different. He felt a part of his chakra leaving his body and wrap around the hilt of the kunai, and suddenly a large tug pulled Naruto through the air. To everyone else the boy simply vanished and reappeared in a flash of orange light before he was in front of Haku, his arms outspread, taking the dagger to the back. He blinked for a moment in surprise and then looked down at Haku, whose eyes opened slightly at the sound of metal hitting flesh, and then they widened. He smiled weakly, feeling drained as the pain of the hit set in. Told you I'd save you, he mumbled before falling to the side, his eyes rolling into the back of his head. Tears fell from Haku's eyes as she looked down at the boy who had just saved her life. She had resigned herself to dying for them, and here he was saving her, dying for her. Looking to the Uchiha, who was standing in shock, she flicked two senbon into his neck, knocking him out before ripping off the blonde's coat and shirt, easing the kunai out. The wound was deep, but luckily not fatal. Oddly though, he had cuts all over his arms and chest, looking like high-pressure paper cuts. Shaking her head she did her best to wrap the wound before she felt Zabuza-sama was in trouble. She tried to force an ice mirror, but her chakra wouldn't comply, her mind was frantic in worry over Naruto and now Zabuza. Luckily miracles seemed to be piling up today as what she saw next shocked and elated her. Zabuza glared at the infamous copy ninja Kakashi, wondering how exactly he had gotten into this predicament. He had dogs binding his arms and legs, and his sword was off to his left in the mist. Not only that, but through the whole fight Kakashi had been proposing some kind of offer for him, Haku and Naruto to actually come to Konoha with him. You're going to have to kill me Kakashi, that's the only way they'll set foot there until I say they're ready. Zabuza growled, trying to break away from the dogs. Kakashi sighed and steeled his gaze before starting his hand signs. Very well, goodbye Zabuza. With that the charge of the Rikiri built up and Kakashi's hand as he rushed forward, intent on shoving his hand through the mist demon's chest. It seemed as if the demon's death was assured when out of nowhere a blade crackling with the same white-blue electricity surrounding Kakashi's hand got in the way. The blade cracked and hissed before both fields of lightning cancelled out each other and the dog started growling at the newcomer. Holding a blade loosely in one hand, Kakashi blinked when he saw who had interrupted his attack. Before him, wearing a slash-through headband just like Zabuza's on his neck, was a man around 5'8" in height and seemed a bit wiry, but what shocked Kakashi was the man's grin like he had just do something really fun, something belonging on that of a child. He had dark black hair cutting around his hair in loose manner, not falling longer than his eyes, with a large wit streak going off to the right. He wore a dark black tank top and baggy black pants, two blades on either hip, along with a belt filled with different color stones, and a seemingly empty slot. Kakashi looked at the blade and saw a glowing yellow topaz placed in the hilt of the drawn sword and wondered slightly who he was dealing with. The newcomer grinned at both of them before turning to Zabuza, who was staring at the man, or teen, Kakashi couldn't tell, with shock in his eyes. Then the mysterious swordsman exclaimed in a happy voice, something that made Kakashi almost fall over in laughter. Hey Zabu. I came just in time to save you from being zapped. Do I have amazing timing or what? Grinning has literally pat himself on the back before seemingly just noticing the large dogs. Oh, maybe not, the newcomer shrugged and turned to Kakashi. So, what did he do to make you mad? Let me guess, he said you had a freaky eye. No worries, we all have one weird thing or another. Like Zabu. He used to sleep with his sword like it was a teddy bear. At this Kakashi did fall over, he knew this was a battlefield, but he couldn't help it. Imagining the infamous demon of the mist cuddling his blade was far too much of a powerful mental image. Zabuza looked murderous. Jace. What the hell are you doing here? He growled, his eyes promising death as soon as he was free of this mess. The now identified Jace blinked and turned back and smiled. I wanted to see Midget and little Haku. Where are they? I brought them presents. Jace said, nodding and patting a side pocket. Zabuza growled some more. Have you noticed that we're in the middle of a battle here? Jace blinked and looked around, as if noticing everything for the first time. The mist was rapidly thinning without constant flow of chakra to it, so Jace could see everyone and what was going on. Naruto, looking very pale with an almost crying Haku over him, not a good sign, so Jace turned to Kakashi and asked politely. Can you make your doggies go bye-bye? I'm sure we can talk this out. Kakashi blinked and sat up, since hearing the swordsman's name he had stopped laughing, trying to remember where he had heard it from. I've been trying to do that since the beginning. Kakashi muttered, dispelling his ninkin. Zabuza stood shakily and glared, about to open his mouth when suddenly a clapping was heard. Everyone turned to see a very large-sized army of mercenaries standing before a small mouse-like man who was laughing. Demon of the Mist, huh? Couldn't defeat one group from Konoha, what a waste. At least one of them looks like they took out that damn blonde. I've wanted to do that since the beginning. Oh well, just means I don't have to pay you now, and my men can do whatever with this hostage. Two men brought out a tied-up and gagged tsunami, lecherous grins on their faces. Haku, who already looked ready to kill the man from his comment on Naruto, but seeing what he meant about the women she was close to standing. Jay slowly popped one of the stones from his blade and slipped in a dark blue sapphire. In his other blade he slipped in a white diamond in the hilt before drawing it as well. Slashing the air and sending chakra to both blades. Two waves of chakra turned into a blast of water and wind, the water blasting a good portion of the mini-army, hitting the two men holding the woman first, but missing her completely, following the wind blast, which instantly froze anything hit by the water wave. Jace knelt, panting slightly and glaring, while Kakashi had moved and grabbed the woman and was back in a flash. Picking himself up, Jace looked to Kakashi and then to Zabuza, he smirked and said in a light voice. Damn, I meant to get all of them. Luckily I made a mouse sculpture. Grinning he pointed to a frozen statue of Gato, frozen in a scream. Suddenly the mercenaries, realizing their pay stub was gone, started getting angry. They all started advancing as one before an arrow slammed into the ground before them. Behind the shinobi a group of people from the village. In front was a child, the grandson of the bridge builder. Leave our homes alone. He shouted, and they mercenaries, now outnumbered, fled. Jace wrapped an arm around both Kakashi and Zabuza and yawned. Let's get somewhere we can talk, I've been traveling forever. Call off the genin so we can look after the wounded. Zabuza sighed, seeing his paycheck turning full simply nodded, not sure where to go from here, they had actually needed that money. Fine, Kakashi, lead the way. You'll explain your deal to the Gaki and we'll see what he wants. Kakashi nodded, smiling happy as he called out to his genin. Sakura, who had dragged Tazuna with her as she checked on her Sasuke-kun, looked up to him when he called as did Kiba, looking up from where he was looking at Naruto with a confused expression on his face. Let's meet at Tazuna's house. We're all done here, mission complete. The genin smiled while Haku lifted Naruto up, Sakura shouldering her precious Sasuke-kun. It was 3 days before everyone was up and fully recovered, now was the time for a group meeting. Kakashi stood before everyone, leaned against a wall with his nose in his little orange book. Oddly enough Zabuza had one just like it, sitting on the couch with a bored expression. Kakashi looked up when everyone was there and smiled slightly. Alright, now that we're all here, to that statement he got glares all around, since he had been the last one there, everyone else had been there for over an hour. Let him introduce everybody. I'm Hada Kakashi, he then pointed to Zabuza on the couch, that's Mamachi Zabuza, he pointed to the two on the opposite couch. That would be Uzumaki Naruto and Mamachi Haku, he pointed to his 3 genin sitting on the floor, and my genin Uchiha Sasuke, Haruno Sakura, and Inuzuka Kiba. He heard an indignant bark and chuckled. Sorry, and his partner Akamaru. He then pointed to Jace. You're the 7 swordsman elemental swordsman Jace Hirata, aren't you? Jace smiled and nodded, jumping up. That's right. Now I'll never remember all those names, so I'll give you all nicknames. He then proceeded to point to everyone. He first pointed to Kakashi and Zabuza, you're now Scarecrow and No Brow, he pointed to Haku and Naruto. Ice Princess and Midget, then shifted to the 3 genin and said, Emo, Dog Boy, and Pinky. With that done he nodded and sat back down. Everyone besides Kakashi was giving him a death glare to which he obliviously hummed through. Zabuza sighed and turned to Kakashi, just get on with your deal. Right, Naruto, I want to give you and the rest of you the chance to come to Konoha. Naruto blinked at the copy ninja and then said. What's the catch? No catch, simply come and become a shinobi of Konoha. We can offer you asylum from Hunter-nin and claim you as our own. Not all of Konoha will welcome you, but it's the best chance to achieve Hokage status, eh? Naruto blinked and looked down before turning to Haku. What do you think? She blinked and then smiled. I would love to see your home village, Naruto-kun. Naruto blinked and then nodded. Alright, I'll take the deal. Naruto said in a low murmur, nervous about going home. Kakashi smiled and patted the boy on the back. Good, I'll send word ahead of us to let Hokage-sama know what to expect. Ace blinked and raised his hand, waving it like a 5-year-old with a question. Kakashi smiled and nodded. Do I get to come? I don't see why not. Kakashi said with a slight smile. Jace jumped up happily and yelled something about victory training before running out. Zabuza sighed. So much potential wasted on a mask and a girl, poor kid. Kakashi blinked and looked at him curiously, and Zabuza shook his head. That's for him to explain, anyway, since I'm going now I'm gonna rest, wake me up when you're leaving. Zabuza muttered, walking off with his nose still in the book he borrowed from Kakashi. Team 7 had officially decided as a whole, the trip back from Wave was going to be an extremely long one. It had only been a day on the 3-day trip and already they were steadily being driven into an urge to kill a certain swordsman due to his oblivious and idiotic antics. Zabuza's group just found it all hilarious. One situation was happening now as they walked down the dirt path. Decidedly they chose to walk back instead of moving at more shinobi-like speeds due to the simple fact that they could. After all, Konoha wasn't expecting them back for another week. Team 7 was walking in a horizontal line down the path, Sakura berating Kiba for making an offhanded joke about her hair color in mid-conversation, something about how wonderful nature was on her part, and him asking if her hair was actually naturally that color. Sasuke simply brooded off next them, while Kakashi read his little orange book next to the last Ichiha. The someone like Jace, the joke was itching to be made. So somehow appearing on the end and getting everyone's arms to link up, he started skipping, more or less dragging the rest of them along with him as he went. Oh, we're off to see the wizard. The wonderful wizard of ounces. After a good 10 minutes of singing and skipping, the teen stopped and grinned, pointing to each. We're going to ask the wizard for gifts. Pointing to the scarecrow Jounin he shouted, you need a brain. Then he paused, shifting his finger between both the Jounin and Naruto going. Well, actually you both need one, so you can both be the scarecrow. After getting an indignant shout and a lazy glare from both respectively, he moved on to the rest of his joke, his stupid grin never leaving his face. Moving to his pink-haired target he supplied her questioning, borderline glare with a gleeful will ask him to give you courage. He shifted to pointing between Zabuza and Sasuke, ignoring the banshee scream from an enraged Pinkette, saying you two need hearts. Frowning as if in though he grinned and stated, and Haku can be Dorothy. Smiling as if he was finished, he obliviously walked past all the dirty looks when Kiba suddenly shouted. What about me? Jace grinned, his setup landing hook, line and sinker. Oh, you wanted to be Dorothy? Well, if you enjoy wearing a dress, that's your thing. The pup can be Toto if you like. Jay said with a cheeky grin, smirking at the enraged but speechless look on Kiba's face. With that he happily walked in front of everyone on his way back, the only one he hadn't managed to make angry being Haku. The whole confrontation pretty much set the mood for the rest of the walk to Konoha and the meeting thereafter. One aged-old Hokage was sitting behind his desk, reading specific documents meant for no one's eyes but his own. In laments terms, reading the same little orange book Kakashi was often seen with. Just as he was getting to a good part of his story, he heard a slight ruckus behind the heavy oak doors leading to his office, something about not being able to barge in there when the two doors were kicked open rather hard, sending both to make indents in his wall. Twitching, about to give the interrupter a piece of his mind when suddenly he froze at the shock of blonde hair and the foxy grin on the team before him. He had grown a great deal since he had last seen him, but that smile never changed. His suspicion was confirmed when the voice, loud as ever, shouted in an uncaring crass tone. Hey, old man. You ready to retire and give me your job yet? What happened next was a slight bit more of a surprise to the aged Hokage, as from behind her a beautiful black-haired girl, just a bit older than Naruto it seemed, appeared behind the boy and swiftly grabbed the boy's ear. In a soft but stern voice the girl let out a warning to the blonde. I thought we agreed you wouldn't make a scene until after we were introduced, Naruto-kun. The boy had seemed to pale considerably before answering. Sorry Haku-chan. Won't happen again. Letting out a loose bit of nervous laughter he was suddenly yelping in pain as the girl dragged him before the desk and forcefully making him bow with her as they apologized. The god of shinobi could only smile wider at the scene, remembering a very similar couple back before the boy had been born. Alright, if you two are done with your lovers, a voice called from the doorway and Saratobi looked up in surprise to see two ranked missing shinobi before him in his doorway, behind a slightly ragged looking Team 7. Without missing a beat, the old man turned to Kakashi and simply stated. You better explain. It's a long and funny story, Hokage-sama. Kakashi said with an eye smile as a blushing Naruto and Haku glared daggers at the former seventh swordsman of the mist, who simply ignored them. The Hokage simply folded his hands before him and raised an eyebrow. Well then, lucky for you Kakashi, I have plenty of time and I do enjoy to laugh, now tell me what happened. But that the tale of their mission was retold, from the demon brother encounter, to which Sasuke took out with the aid of one of Kiba's Tsuuga to the encounter and first sighting of Naruto, to the final battle at the bridge. Currently they were still on that topic as the genin were retelling your battle. Sasuke was getting to the end of his fight. I was about to strike and take out the enemy, said enemy looked down in shame at her defeat, missing the scathing look from the blonde sent to the last Uchiha. Sasuke didn't notice it at all, or if he did he deemed the reactions below his notice. When Uzumaki somehow got in front of me, though he was on the other side of the bridge. The last statement was filled with confusion as he shot the blonde a look that screamed for him to explain. Hiba, remembering the certain action, nodded and added his 2 cents. It was really weird, me and Akamaru were watching him and 1 second he was 50 meters or so away and then the next he was in front of Sasuke. There was like a weird orangish red flash of light while he was running too. Hearing all this, both Sarutobi and Kakashi looked at each other, both having a single thought. Hirishin coughing into his hand, the aged leader nodded before saying. Thank you for your reports, Team 7, except Kakashi, is hereby dismissed. Kakashi looked to his students as they turned and smiled. Day off for recovery tomorrow, but meet at the usual meeting place at 7 after that. All 3 genin nodded before they walked out, all having something to think about, some more than others, and all wondering what was with Uzumaki Naruto. As soon as they left, Sarutobi looked to Naruto and asked. Naruto-kun, do you know exactly what you might have done? The civilian not yet shinobi blinked and looked down in thought, having this, along with other things resting on his head for a while. Actually, that fight confused the hell out of me. The Hokage winced at the blonde's vocabulary. I remember defeating Dog Breath, and then the mist started clearing, and I saw Haku-chan in trouble. I started running, not really expecting to get there in time when I was suddenly in front of some big cage with a piece of paper on it. The Hokage and Kakashi shared another look, hoping this was something in Naruto's imagination, but deep down knowing it had to do with the seal. Any hopes it wasn't were shattered when Naruto continued. Then there was some big furball behind the cage who called itself Kyuubi. It said we were in my mind or something, and that I should respect it. I told it to go to hell, and it said it unlocked some bloodline limit called the Harami or something. The next thing I know I felt a pull and things kind of slowed, and I was in front of Duckbud. For his story, the Haku, Zabuza, and Jace were blinking in surprise at this new information. All were having mixed reactions, but none were showing it. Sarutobi simply sighed and made a few seals, keeping sound from leaking out of the room due to well-placed seals. What I'm about to tell you all is a double S-class secret. Naruto-kun, how shall I put it? Sarutobi pondered. The brat's a demon container to the Kyuubi, isn't he? A gruff voice asked as Zabuza pieced things together. Slowly they were all falling into place, the brat's reserves, his unnatural healing, and his freakish stamina. Now that it was right in front of him it all made sense. Am a demon? Naruto asked, his eyes glazed as he remembered the shouts directed at him before he had escaped this place. His musings were cut short as a fist sent his face plowing into the wood boards of the floor. Looking up about to yell at the person who hit him, he saw pissed Zabuza. You're a brat, you're no more demon than I am. Zabuza growled before turning his glare to Jace, who simply said. So says the demon of the bloody mist. Dodging from a battalion of senbon needles, Jace hid behind the chair of the Hokage. Yield, yield. The shrimp's fine, just a container, got it. Aku placed a comforting hand on Naruto's shoulder and he looked up, blinking in wonder at her caring eyes staring at him. It's like our conversation on returning to Konoha a while back. Regardless of if Konoha hates you still or not, if you're a demon or not, you have us now, and together we'll all show people our worth. Right. Slowly a smile formed onto the lips of Uzumaki Naruto, before turning into a full-blown grin as he nodded quickly. You're right, Haku-chan. I'll prove my worth to everyone, as Uzumaki Naruto, future Hokage. Sarutobi smiled briefly before looking to Kakashi and clearing his throat. Yes, you are the container, Naruto-kun, but that simply means you are the jailer keeping the Kyuubi inside the seal the Yondaime put on you. There is another thing though, completing as to why this is a double S rank secret instead of a single S class. Your biological father, Hess, the one who perfected the move you used to an art form. He was known by most as the Yellow Flash, Namikaze Minato. Naruto turned, giving the old man a dumbstruck look. Me father, you're saying my dad was the fucking fourth Hokage? Hell yeah. Take that, I'm Konoha royalty bitches. Naruto proceeded to continue to shout obscenities accompanied by proclamations of being the best, all while doing a terrifying and disturbing victory dance around the room. He was stopped by a loud cough, gaining his attention. If you're quite finished and amused and slightly irritated, Saratobi let out, walking to a portrait of the fourth on the wall. With a burst of his chakra and a hand seal no one in the room recognized, the portrait slid open, revealing a blade and scroll. These items were supposed to be given to you when you reach the rank of Chunin, but I can make an exception on one condition. Naruto was in front of the man in an instant. Anything, give me. The Uzumaki said, reaching for the items held out of his reach and currently damming his size. The Hokage smirked. You, along with your group, are to become shinobi of Konoha. We already know this, give me already. The Hokage's smirk grew as he finished. You, Haku and Jace are to be genin under Zabuza and form your own team. You must also have a more difficult test to gain your ranking, seeing as how regardless you'll be shinobi. Bring on the challenge, old man. Wait, did you just say we have to be genin? Not only that, but the airhead is on our team too, he yelled, pointing at a pouting Jace. Come on, we're Chunin at least. We can freaking whoop the asses of all the genin in Konoha at once. Saratobi grinned evilly. Then that is the test. If you can take on the combined efforts of the genin teams in Konoha, you're free to go straight to Chunin, still under Zabuza. If you fail, then you're genin and are stuck on D-rank missions for a month. Before Zabuza or Jace could object, Naruto shouted deal, not knowing the hell of D-rank missions. The two shook on it before saying. Then you are dismissed, your test begins tomorrow morning, you're responsible for gathering the teams in this formal spar. Now Kakashi, please show them to their lodgings. Kakashi simply gave the old man a look of confusion, having sat through the whole meeting with one ear on the conversations, while his good eye was on his reading material. The old man gave him a knowing look and shifted his eyes to the confidential information left by his now deceased successor, and Kakashi's eyes widened. You don't mean? I do indeed. I believe there is a seal keeping the estate in its stasis shape. Stasis wa? Naruto asked, now catching on to the conversation. He means keeping it like it was before the seal was placed on it. Come on, I'll show you to your new home. Kakashi quickly left by Shushin, Zabuza, Haku, and Jace following as Naruto blinked and then growled. God damn it. Someone needs to teach me that damn technique. As he followed their signatures, jumping out the window, Naruto managed to get halfway to the location he was supposed to go before the villagers caught on to who he was. Apparently news traveled faster than his running pace, and soon the hateful glares of his past were once more directed at him. To the blonde, they somehow had gotten colder. Shivering, Naruto shook his head and concentrated on running. He couldn't think about these damn villagers with 20-foot sticks shoved up their asses. Rounding a corner, he slammed straight into a thing from his worst nightmare, a mob. Suddenly he was in the center of it, and then before he could react he was being stabbed in 3 places at once. Growling, he was about to try and fight back when his limbs locked up and he hit the floor. A paralysis basone, a strong one too, for it to affect him. It would take 3 minutes before he could move again, what usually took most people 5 hours, but for those 3 minutes he was left to their mercy, and unsurprisingly they weren't big on showing mercy at the moment. A minute passed, with things being screamed at him and various fluids being poured on, half of which he really didn't want to identify, before something happened. Everything suddenly stopped. The reason was a mist covering the area and a voice coming from all directions. You're all dead. In seconds, screaming began as people were cut down where they stood. Some people thought to get away when Senbon stuck into various and often deadly places, though some were just to cause as much physical pain as possible. Suddenly Naruto found himself lifted and being carried off. That answers my question, the blonde muttered through the poison as the group was finished off, civilians and shinobi alike. Suddenly the mist cleared as Anbu appeared and zeroed in on Zabuza. For the murder of Konoha civilians and shinobi, you're to be executed. Suddenly another figure appeared, taking the form of one pissed off Saratobi. 5 minutes. 5 minutes Hess out of my office and already Hess attacked, and you Anbu are near useless. All of you are sentenced to D-rank missions and a suspension of your Anbu license. But Hokage-sama, no, clean up this mess or you will be the ones executed. That is an order. Turning to the group from Kiri, Saratobi quickly motioned for them to follow him as he took them far out to the border of Konoha. Turning to a now moving Naruto, who was looking at his new clothes with a frown, the third sighed and said. I am so sorry, Naruto-kun. Looking up, the blonde shook his head. No problem, Jai-san. I kind of expected this, let's just see my new house. Nodding, Saratobi moved to the gate and motioned Naruto forward as well. I'm about to unseal the barrier around this place. When I do, place your blood on the spiral on the gate. Blinking, Naruto nodded, and as soon as the barrier was up, bit his thumb and dropped some blood on it. Suddenly the gate sprung open and revealed a pathway to an estate bigger than he had ever seen. Eyes widened in wonder, the blonde moved forward and asked the aged leader. This is. Hi Naruto-kun, this is the Namikaze estate. Welcome home, Naruto. Naruto had decided one thing, his house was freaking awesome. It was made up of 2 one-story houses with a quadrillion, ROOMS, really 20, but to someone who has never owned a permanent house that's a lot, that both connected to a large 3-story house which the old man had called the main house. It had a dojo, hot springs, rive, and a huge backyard that connected with the Land of Fire's very large forest. That was without going into any details. Really all he had explored was the main house, but still, from that it was awesome. In the main house he had a library that started on the first floor and ended on the second. The first floor had a large kitchen, big sitting room, and the entrance to the library. The basement was what seemed to be an office, connected to a testing area of some sorts. Maybe a private dojo, Naruto didn't check really, excited to move on to the next area. The second floor had 4 rooms and 2 bathrooms. Each room was completely furnished and Naruto had paused at the second floor. The last room had him on the brink of tears. Excitedly Naruto had ran up the stairs after getting glances at the first floor. More detailed search could be seen later. Right now he needed to know how cool his new home was. Quickly he went through the first door, coming out into the library again. Shutting that door here and to the next door and found a room that was large, chair in the corner with drawers against a wall and a nice comfy looking bed. Thinking about it he realized he was slightly tired, not physically but mentally from the day's events, but pushed it away in favor of searching. When he finished searching he could sleep. Leaving that room Naruto checked 2 more rooms, seeing much of the same when he opened the final door. As soon as he did he froze. The room was painted blue, a tiny cradle was situated in the corner. It was littered with toys and the closet was slightly open, showing various baby outfits inside. Pictures lined the walls of the room, showing various people. Mostly blondes and pictures taken from what seemed to be another place altogether. Pictures of the Namikaze complex with people smiling, laughing and waving at the camera, all of them blonde. The other village pictures had red-haired people, much the same as in the pictures of the Namikaze complex. All of them were laughing and smiling, some showing a few fights, but from their eyes, you could tell they were happy. Family, the blonde slowly realized as he looked around at all the pictures. These were pictures of his family, both on his mother's and father's side. Closing his eyes briefly, the Namikaze heir shook his head, refusing to cry. His efforts for to nod as he looked at the banner crossing the room. Painted in big orange lettering were the words "Welcome home." Naruto with that last item. The blonde's knees hit the ground and he started crying, knowing truly he was home, knowing he had family who loved him and cared for him, and also realizing at the same time that he wouldn't have the chance to know any of them. After a few minutes the blonde sniffed and wiped his eyes, finally noticing people behind him. Turning he smiled at Zabuza, Haku, Kakashi, and the third. He immediately felt stupid. He knew what family was like. All of them loved him. Well, he wasn't sure about Kakashi, but the man seemed to generally care about his well-being. Zabuza was like a father, a rather rough one, but a father nonetheless, while Saratobi was definitely a surrogate grandfather. Haku wasn't sure if he felt that she was a sister or not, but she was very precious to him. Smiling at all 4 of them he waved off their looks and said, "I'll be fine. I'm gonna check the 3rd floor." Zabuza nodded slightly and opened the door to the room next to him. "You go ahead Gaki, I'm staying down here. I kind of like this room, good view of the river." Haku smiled encouragingly at him and walked up, hugging him briefly. "Yes, I believe I'll take a room down here as well, I am rather tired after all." She walked into the room across the hall from Zabuza. Kakashi gave a slight eye smile and said, "I just remembered I left my stove on." This caused both the Hokage and Naruto to sweat drop as the man left via Shushin. The Hokage gave Naruto a smile and patted his back. "I have some more paperwork to finish," the old man and turned, leaving. Cursing the bane of his existence. Naruto smiled slightly, understanding the message under all of it. They were letting him see his parents' room alone. Silently thanking them all, the young Namikaze Uzumaki walked up the stairs, pausing at the door at the top. Naruto opened the door slowly, taking his first step into his parents' room. Letting out a slow breath he looked around the room, taking it all in. The whole 3rd floor was his parents' bedroom. Walking slowly in, he slid his hand across the 2 dressers, a mirror hanging over the top of both of them. Next to the dressers on the walls were photos, a picture of a blonde man happily hugging a laughing red-haired lady, knowing immediately it was his mother and father. Smiling he moved on, looking at a picture of his father and a young Kakashi, flanked by a black-haired boy and a brown-haired girl. Keeping on walking, Naruto found a desk in the corner, still littered with papers, some official looking, while others were what seemed to be notes on some kind of seal or something else, much too complicated for him to understand. On the back desk was a circled date, October 10th. A soft smile formed on the loudmouth's face as he circled the date as well with his finger. On the desk was a black book, in gold lettering it was labeled journal. Blinking at it, Naruto started to reach for it, before thinking better of it and walking on. That was private, he would leave his father his own privacy, no matter how much he wanted to know about the man. That, and he was fearful to know his father for some reason, some sort of twist in his mind, felt that the man should remain the god he built in his mind. Not the human he knew he would find in those pages. Walking on, the Uzumaki found himself before a window shining with the setting sunlight, a beautiful view over the forest where the sun was setting on the horizon. Walking past the window he found himself in front of twin closets, one filled with clothing for a female, obviously his mother's. The other being his father's. Inside were jounin vests, black shirts, and two matching sets of cloaks, one saying fourth in kanji, the other labeled yellow flash. Beside the two was a headband with the Konoha insignia. Smiling, the blonde grabbed it and gently held it up to his chest. Walking to the king-size bed situated across from the twin dressers, Naruto sat down and looked around. On the other side of the bed was a door that doubtless went to a bathroom or something of that sort, but Naruto would check those out later. For now, he just wanted to rest and wonder that in one day he had found his family and he had found his true home. Softly Naruto closed his eyes, falling easily asleep with a small, soft smile on his face. Maybe things in Konoha wouldn't be so bad. Happy dreams were dissolved when a bucket of cold water hit him, courtesy of his new, yet old sensei. "What the hell, you bastard? You soaked my parents' bed." Zabuza smirked and muttered. Kai immediately the water that was previously soaking the Uzumaki was gone. "Gaki, you suck ass at Jinjutsu. Now get up and get ready, we have ass to kick." Naruto blinked in confusion for a moment before grinning, remembering. "Oh hell yeah. So, did you issue the challenges?" Zabuza smirked. "Nah, you guys are gonna do that." Naruto simply blinked. "What?" And it was there that Zabuza's plan to get the fight started took place as he explained it to the new Konoha shinobi, an evil grin spreading across both of their faces. It was an average training session with Team 9. Lee was shouting about youth and punching the air as they waited for their sensei, Neji was leaning against a tree, shaking his head at the failure Lee was, and Tenten was practicing her throw, again, while waiting. Suddenly things took a turn for the abnormal as a black and white-haired teen suddenly appeared and caught on of the kunai Tenten threw by the hilt. He seemed to look at it and then around his surroundings. He then turned to the bun-haired girl and asked. "Isn't it dangerous to throw weapons around the mentally handicapped and the blind?" Motioning his head he indicated Neji and Lee. The team all stared in shock as the teen just showed up and insulted two of them in one go. "By the way, shouldn't you be more worried about your nails? I mean, Kinoichi can't honestly be taken seriously." Make that 3. Honestly he lied about the last part, but he had to do this for the plan. Immediately he was ducking, squatting down as 2 fingers passed where his head was previously. Letting out a low whistle as he looked up at Neji he said. "For a blind dude you're pretty fast. Sucks about being blind, must be why you got stuck with a weapon user wannabe and the defective green guy." Immediately he was dodging a roundhouse kick and kunai shuriken and many other pointy objects. "Well, I was just coming to check out the other teams, glad we have nothing to worry about from the Special Olympic team. Hey. The 3 of you put together would make a functioning team member." Laughing the swordsman ran, Team 9 on his heels. Part 1 of the operation was complete. Aku arrived in front of an odd team, put together of a timid-looking girl with pale eyes, a teen wearing shades that looked incredibly intimidating. Go Shino, favorite character folks, sorry about that, and a black-haired boy who just looked fake for some reason. Taking a deep breath, she hated doing this, but Naruto and Zabuza were counting on her, she stepped forward. "Hey, you guys look weak." She shouted, though it came out fumbling. It managed to catch the team's attention as they all looked at her, breaking from the watching for their sensei. "Your sunglasses are horrible." Haku winced at the insult, it was horrible. Oh, why did she have to do this? This wasn't her style. The fake-looking teen smiled, which creeped Haku out, and replied, "That's not a good insult. A good insult would be saying that kimono you're wearing looks so horrendous I want to puke on it to make it look better." Haku twitched and gritted her teeth. She liked this kimono. "Well, you're a stupid jerk." All that got was the sunglasses-wearing boy raising an eyebrow and she sighed in defeat. "I'm supposed to provoke you into fighting, I'm not good at it. We're having a genin test and we need help from all the genin teams. So could you possibly follow me and look like you're angry?" Sai looked to his 2 teammates, Hinata poked her fingers and said. "I guess we could." Shino simply nodded and Sai turned and said. "Sure, start running." Haku smiled and bowed. Arigato. After that she started running, the team following her and trying to look like they were angry. Team 7 blinked as they all met up again on the bridge. Sakura was the first to voice her complaint as Sasuke leaned against the railing and Kiba played with Akamaru in the middle of it. "How come we have to meet up again today? Sensei said we had today off, didn't he? You're here because my brats kicked your asses so hard last time you all fought and now they're gonna do it again, plus with every other genin backing you up." A voice right behind her said, making her let out a slight scream as she jumped and turned in one movement. Sasuke and Kiba both twitched and Zabuza waved his hand. "Follow me for your destruction." With that he started moving, though keeping it slow for his max speed so the brats could keep up. Team 10 stood under a large tree, Ino leaning against it as Shikamaru slept underneath and Choji simply ate. All was peaceful until a loud voice erupted from the bottom of the hill. "Boy, fatso. How about you and your bimbo friend come and catch me, if you can move that is. A blonde from the bottom of the hill yelled, a Konoha headband strapped to his forehead. Immediately Choji grew furious. I'm big-boned. Ino grew equally angry at the comment towards her and grabbed Shikamaru by the shirt. Come on you bum, we got a lesson to teach. DCH, troublesome. The Nara muttered as he was dragged behind his two friends as they gave chase to the blonde running from them. And a large open training ground is where all the team met. 6 of them immediately trying to kill their targets for the first few seconds before noticing the other genin. They all paused for a few moments and in that time the only adult, Zabuza, took center stage. Alright, you 12 are gonna help me with my genin test. My 3 say they can take down all the genin in Konoha put together and you're here to prove them wrong. If you do, they stay genin, if you don't, then they're Chunin and immediately your superiors. Zabuza smirked. Divide yourself however you like, no hold barred and anything allowed. Go. Immediately Jay snorted. Ooh, scary. 4 of them are Kunoichi anyway. A slight twitch in his hand that only Niji and Hinata caught told his lie, but everyone else witnessed the women start to grow in anger. I mean, I can probably beat them all with one hand tied behind my back. Immediately he was surrounded on 3 sides by pure righteous feminine justice. Hinata was behind him, in a fighting stance but not as angry, mainly confused by his lie. Immediately Jace ducked and dodged many attempts to rip off his family jewels as he moved back, leading them away from the main group. Haku and Naruto both sweat-dropped at this, knowing the reason he had lied like that. Zabuza had promised the sword-loving teen a new and better sword that could hold chakra if he lived through the test this way. Personally they both knew this was suicide, but Jace was always on board when it came to a new sword, or anything sword-related really. Shaking their head, Naruto strode forward and smirked. Let's see you, I wanna get ducked, the creepy-looking black-haired guy with the too-tight shirt, the fat kid, Andu. I always wanted to fight a blind kid. Niji twitched and his stoic mask was broken as he flung himself forward. I'm not blind. His roar was echoed by I'm not fat. And off he was, dodging extra large hands and feet, chakra-filled fingers, some weird ink-like things, and fireballs. The whole time he was laughing like a kid in a candy store. Haku had senbon in each hand, smiling. Well then that leaves me with you 4, I apologize for any injuries you may get ahead of time. Her eyes widened as the kid in green spandex appeared before her, bowing. I apologize as well, now let's begin. And Haku's fight started by being blown through the air by a very strong punch, straight into one of her mirrors, as a dome appeared around all of them. Jace was seriously doubting his own sanity as he realized how bad he had put himself in the hole. 3 very angry females were not good opponents, especially when one of them had very accurate throws and was aiming all her pointy objects at your unmentionable sexually. Where was she getting all of these weapons? It would be physically impossible to carry those with the way she was dressed. So far he hadn't been able to fight back at all, every ounce of his will put into keeping his boys intact. Now he was starting to sweat. Suddenly he couldn't feel the bottom of his right leg and looking down he saw 2 fingers pressed into his leg by the only non-angry female. She must have seen through his lie and was clear-headed enough to plan. She had cut off his retreat and now he couldn't retreat. Standing on one leg Jace unsheathed his blades and started blocking kunai. Shuriken was that a kitchen sink look, I was told to say that by sensei. I really believe Kunoichi are just as good as male shinobi. Mercy. Suddenly the 3 stopped and gave very evil smirks. Oh we'll show mercy as soon as you give us those swords of yours to decorate. Jace's eyes grew wide and he narrowed his eyes, pointing his blades at them. I'll never surrender my precious blades. Fight to the death. With that he jumped at them, hopping on one leg to be beat into the ground horribly by the 3 Kunoichi, honorably taking his beating from them as any man should when he ticks off a member of the female race. Jace had failed his part, now it was up to Haku and Naruto to keep them in the Chunin running. So, picking out 2 rookies of the year, an unknown factor, and an Akamichi with a sensitive weight issue, was a tad on the insane side. Still, the Namikaze heir could definitely say he was having an amazing time in this fight. Flipping over another enlarged fist, the Uzumaki blocked a charging pure black lion that seemed to be made of ink that had been charging down, said dodged limb with one of his now separated blades. Using the force of the lion's jump he pushed himself back farther, sending a kick straight into the Uchiha's face as he prepared to fire another fireball at him. Naruto grinned as the raven-haired shinobi started hacking up smoke. Unfortunately he didn't get to enjoy the view too long as he was dodging a barrage of chakra-enhanced fingers. One touch from those things and it was game over, even for his advanced healing. These 4 would take any sign of weakness apart and leave him in shreds. Knowing this the swordsman let himself be pushed towards a tree and then proceeded to backflip onto its surface hoping this would work. Sending chakra into his blade like he would when he powered up his arm for an extra hard punch, he focused on the edge and tried to make it sharp before slicing against the trunk. It worked, but due to it being the first try his blade sunk halfway and stopped. Growling, he tried to pull it free, but he wasn't given the chance due to an oversized fist slamming into him due to his moment of being distracted. Holding onto the blade stuck into the tree, the Namikaze kept it in grasp as the whole blasted trunk fell over. Rolling as soon as he hit the ground, he nimbly dodged another, or possibly the same, ink lion, as kunai rapidly flew at him. Using one of his blades, he quickly blocked the kunai as best he could, one of two managing thin slices on him. Suddenly a voice from behind him shouted. "You're in my range of divination." Naruto's eyes widened, and quickly he jumped forward, unfortunately not fast enough as quick fingers burst forward, nailing all the tenketsu on his legs. Falling forward, the blonde grit his teeth and made 3 quick hand seals. Mizubushin no Jutsu. 2 water clones immediately popped up from the water vapor in the air, leaving the blonde panting. Even with his reserves, manipulation with that little water was hard. Immediately the 2 Bushin went on the assault with their blades, slicing at the 4 and making them retreat a bit, trying to buy the original time to recover. Unfortunately for them, the Uchiha with his now active Sharingan easily took one of them out and rushed forward, 2 kunai in hand. Naruto had only one leg painfully unsealed due to him pushing as much chakra as he could through the blocked tenketsu. Quickly he tried to knock the Uchiha's legs out from under him, the Avenger dodged easily with a jump, exactly what Naruto was hoping for. Naruto shoved one of his swords forward and watched as the surprised Sasuke blocked, being pushed backwards through the air. Using one hand, the blonde pushed himself backwards into a roll and used his good leg to flip himself up, barely dodging a meaty fist impacting the ground, causing a crater. Suddenly a kunai was placed at the base of his spine upon landing, along with a glowing palm before his chest. Naruto summed up his feelings in one word. Damn it. Now it was all up to Haku to save the team from the sufferings of D-rank missions. Haku was on the ropes. Her speed was accounting for nothing, since the strange green-wearing shinobi was matching her step for step after he took off his apparent training weights, to which they were amazing in weight if those craters were anything to go by. Not only could he follow her, but so could the boy wearing sunglasses, though how Haku didn't know. The Inyazuka and the other pineapple-headed boy were in the back behind the two. The pineapple-wearing one was talking to the group in low tones, apparently formulating some kind of plan, while the green one kept her out of hearing range. Finally she had enough and threw some senbon at the boy's legs, hoping to take some of his speed down. Deftly he dodged it and seemed to smile more. This whole battle he had that creepy smile on his face, like this was all fun. Finally their planning session seemed to end as the other 3 started moving. She rushed out of the mirror, past the green one who was on her heels, towards a better mirror when suddenly a massive black cloud got in the way of said mirror. Knowing that wasn't good news, Haku switched direction when she had to nimbly roll to dodge twin drills. Suddenly the green-clad boy was in front of her, smiling bigger than ever as he brought his arm back. Haku barely had enough time to cross her arms as the boy's fist smashed into her feeble defense, sending her flying backwards and tumbling across the ground. As she rolled to her feet, suddenly she was stuck, her arms moving of their own accord into a circular position. A voice in front of her said. Shadow possession is a success. Looking down, she blinked in surprise to see her shadow connected to his. So the boy was Inara, she should have known. Suddenly she was surrounded by a buzzing black cloud. Looking around she noticed that it wasn't just a cloud, but a cloud of insects. A monotone voice cut through the buzzing to reach her. You best surrender, or my Kekai will drain your chakra until it is impossible for you to move. Looking down in shame for her defeat, Haku sighed. I surrender. And now it was official, the team was doomed to a month of D-rank missions. Back in the general meeting area, everyone gathered before Zabuza, Naruto and Haku both standing, while the girls dumped a barely conscious Jace on the ground, looking a lot like minced meat. Zabuza observed the scene before him and started laughing. I knew you brats bit off more than you could chew. Anyway, all I need is blonde Gaki, the rest of you can go and do what you please. With that he grabbed a hold of Naruto and vanished in a puff of smoke. Slowly everyone began to disperse, leaving only 2 figures left on the training field. One with her hair in buns and the other still looking like mincemeat but in a sitting position. Slowly the pile of mincemeat said. Why are you still here and staring at me? I want to see your swords. C said, leaning forward to try and get a look at them. No. J said protectively moving backwards with them. Show me them. Tenten replied, moving forward, still trying to see them. Jace hugged his swords for dear life and yelled. Why do you want to see my precious swords? Aw, swords are so amazing. I especially like katanas. Tenten started off, beginning a rant on how awesome swords were. Wait, you like swords? Jay said in surprise, cutting her off mid-rant. Of course. They are some of the best close-ranged weapons to have. Tenten said, as if in shock he would have to ask. Very reluctantly Jace moved one of his blades out. Just don't scratch it or anything. And thus a friendship began between 2 weapons freaks. Naruto and Zabuza appeared before the Hokage, who was simply smirking. Chunin rank, Naruto-kun. Screw you, old man. Naruto yelled, pouting childishly as he turned his head away. The Hokage simply laughed and pulled the scroll and sword out once more. Naruto-kun, there was two things in that test. 1. To show you that big words can lead to a hard fall, and 2. That even the best of shinobi, when met with teamwork, can fall. You'll still get these. Naruto blinked thoughtfully and then nodded, pondering this before grinning and reaching for the items impatiently. The aged man chuckled and handed them over. Just to let you know, not even I know what's in those scrolls. He placed a blood seal on it. So how do I open it? Naruto whined. Thinking that only the Yondium could open it now due to him having the only blood needed. Sarutobi rolled his eyes. Simply prick your finger, he was your father Naruto-kun. Right, taking a deep breath, the blonde pricked his finger and watched a drop of blood slowly drop down and hit the scroll. The scroll glowed yellow briefly before opening slightly, unsealed for all its contents to be read. As the scroll started to open up, it also began to glow. Suddenly, as if though a strong wind burst from inside it, the scroll shot open and glowed a bright yellow, a seal being shown straight in the center of the scroll. The scroll looked almost as complex as the one on Naruto's stomach. It was brightly glowing a dark yellow, seeming to ash everything near it in a golden light. Just as it grew to its brightest, it suddenly faded to a dark inky black, and as if in response, Naruto's body seemed to be blasted by some unseen force. Immediately Kakashi was behind the blonde as he caught him as Sarutobi grabbed the scroll, examining it to see what had caused the reaction. To his surprise, it was not a seal the Sarutobi recognized, and while he was not a seal master like Minato and Jiraiya, he knew a large amount of seals. Finding one of unknown origin disturbed him slightly, and he shifted his gaze to the Namikaze who was out like a light, not responding to any of Kakashi's attempts to wake him up. Slowly the Hokage shook his head and asked himself. Minato, what have you done now? Naruto's mind escaped. Naruto groaned as he looked around, getting up from his lying position. Oddly enough, he was in a plain white room, not decorated at all, and holding nothing but a small white bed at the very far end. Sitting on the bed, someone who Naruto had only seen pictures of. Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage, sat, staring at his son in slight wonder. Naruto realized his face must look something the same. Immediately he scolded and started walking towards the man, not knowing what he was going to do. Right now he was running solely on emotion. Stopping before the still staring man, Naruto brought his fist back and let it sail. It made contact, and a shocked man was left lying on the bed, staring at his son in even more surprise and holding his cheek. A lone tear slid down Naruto's face as his whole body trembled in a mix of emotions. He was confused at what was going on, happy that his father was there while at the same time angry at the man who had placed such a burden in his own son to save such an ungrateful village. All at once he wanted to beat the man and hug him. This was not a situation Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto knew how to deal with. Slowly a single word slid out, only one word that seemed to sum up all of it in one go. Why? It was spoken as a whisper, but that whisper carried all the conflicting emotions that the Namikaze heir felt, and suddenly he felt like he was four once more, running from a mob and eating things he could find in the garbage. The blonde man on the bed slowly sat back up and frowned slightly, seeming as if he wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. Slowly he sighed and looked up at his son, a look of sadness, but also a look of a man who had made a decision and did so without current regrets. The Kyuubi was coming and there was nothing I could do. Sealing was the last and only option I had. I wanted you to be a hero of this village. Slowly, as if unbelieving, the man reached out and touched the shaking boy's cheek, as if confirming he was real. You have grown, my little son. You look only 12, yet you're a Chunin. Your godfather must be training you well, not to mention your mother. Minato's soft smile turned into a confused expression to match his son's angry and confused expression. With an angry step backward, the Uzumaki smacked the hands away and glared at his father, finally having an outlet for all the emotions that had resurfaced due to his return to this village. A hero? This village treated me like shit. No. They treated shit better than they treated me. I was kicked out of the damn orphanage at age 3. I was living on the streets until I was 7. I had to eat from garbage cans, deal with this ungrateful mess you call a village trying to track me down and kill me daily. The only good thing I got from this village was the old man. The only problem was he couldn't do much to help me since this village you gave your life to protect tied his hands in problems as well. Now you're expecting what, some prodigy child raised by some godfather I never knew? I was never raised by anyone. Not until I found my true family. Huffing and out of breath, Naruto glared at the man before him, tears of frustration coming through before the lonely child in him broke. Why did you sentence me to this? Why didn't you make sure I had someone to help me? Did you and mom abandon me? Namikaze Minato could face down armies of foes, rampaging demons, and an angry wife without blinking and a smile. But the sheer magnitude of the things his son had described to him had left the fourth and rumored to be greatest of Hokages speechless. No one had raised him, his village had ignored his wishes and treated his son like a monster. His village had beaten his son. Shaking in shock, Minato tried to process this before looking at his son, at a loss for words. Clearly things had gone wrong, very, very wrong. Looking him in the eyes, Minato slowly said. Tell me of your life, Naruto. 2 hours later, Namikaze Minato was laying on the bed of the room, staring at the ceiling in hard thought. All in all, his son had grown up a lot differently than he expected. Apparently his mother was either dead or missing, his godfather, well, when that man died they'd be having a slight chat, and his son's father figure was an apparent missing nin with a blood fetish. Looking to his son, who refused to make eye contact, Minato said. I never meant for this to happen. His only reply was a scoff. Frowning, the man muttered about mean children not respecting their father. This earned another snort. Where the hell are we anyway? Language, Minato said, trying to be a good father figure, though it seemed the boy took more after his mother, so it seemed like nothing would dissuade his current habit. Naruto shot the man a slight glare. A bit late on the fathering, can you explain, since I know this is your doing? We can work on how you screwed my life over later. Shaking his head, Minato said with a slight smile. This has been one of my projects since I ever started to learn how to seal. It was meant to be a shinobi journal, or something off the sort. I actually adapted with some tips from Sarutobi's student Orochimaru. A shinobi with enough sealing know-how can, in sense, place a small bit of their soul into a seal once it's adapted to them and their blood. It was meant for shinobi families, so if a child ever lost their parent, they had this soul for them to open later on and get to know each other, a bonding experience of sorts. I never expected to use it myself, and the prototype too. So why was it only a prototype? Naruto asked, curiously moving closer. This stuff about seals was interesting. Well, there were some flaws, and I wasn't entirely sure if it would work, but essentially its main problem was the length it worked. It was hard to shorten it. Minato trailed off nervously. So we're stuck here for a while. What's the worst it can be? A day? Naruto asked. About a week, Minato said with a slightly nervous laugh. We're stuck in this small room for a week. Minato's nervous smile got slightly wider. Well, actually, that's the cool part. While your body has been put into a comatose state due to the violent chakra burst, it is still your mind. So theoretically you should be able to change the landscape. Blinking a bit, Naruto eyed the man in a bit of wonder. While he knew nothing about seals, he knew this must have taken a large stroke of genius to put together. Instead of contemplating that, the swordsman closed his eyes and imagined the first setting to come to his mind. Unfortunately, that delved them deeper within it, and soon they were in a place he'd visited only once before. Opening his eyes at the change of lighting, Naruto took a quick few steps back as he spotted the cage before him, just narrowly escaping the building-sized claws crashing into where he was previously. Slowly a long drawl rang out. So the jailer returns, along with the one responsible for cursing me to this damnable prison. To what do I owe this pleasure? Naruto looked up at the cage, now fully realizing it for what it was. This was actually the Kyuubi no Kitsune, mightiest of the Bijuu, and he was stuck in him. Shaking his head, the Uzumaki Namikaze heir looked to his father to see him on guard, glaring into the cage. Is this your way of repaying the favor you owe me? Bringing the one who sealed me here for me to devour? A large toothy grin appeared behind the bars. Because that is a mighty tempting offer. Naruto winced slightly at the loud booming voice. Can't you whisper or something? That's getting annoying as all hell. Suddenly the visage behind the cage vanished, with the odd sound of something very liquid yet solid being sucked into a small space before a large pop resounded and all was quiet. Naruto looked to the still on-guard Minato before he asked. Did Kyuubi just eat himself? No, you idiot, I did not eat myself. Surprisingly, the voice answering was not the loud and booming one that had been used only seconds before, but a strong and authoritative male voice. Suddenly a squishing splash was heard and a grunt of annoyance as a man with long straight black hair and crimson eyes walked up in a dark black kimono, red smoky spirals accenting across all of it. His most defining features being the 9 tails swishing behind him and the fuzzy fox ears on his head. Damn it, brat, can't you get your mind out of this gutter? I knew you humans were disgusting, but if all your minds are like this, I have no idea why Kami made you. Naruto heard none of this, his eyes focusing on the Kyuubi's ears. Those are so freaky, I mean, on a human-like visage it's weird. The Kyuubi stared at him from inside the cage and smirked. Just wait, kid, thanks to your oh-so-ingenious father, you'll be getting them soon enough, as unfortunate as it is to me. Naruto looked to his father in shock, having forgotten he was there due to the Kyuubi transforming. What the hell does he mean? Minato raised his hands. I'm not sure, what do you mean? Minato took a step forward to place his foot in a puddle. Looking down at it in disgust, he looked at Naruto and raised an eyebrow. Growling, Naruto sighed and closed his eyes, focusing on trying to change things around. Suddenly the landscape flashed and instead of a sewer-like cage they were suddenly in a large field, surrounded by mountains on the far edges. On one half was a large forest and on the other was a large lake. The bars containing the Kyuubi were no longer there, instead he had a collar around his neck with spikes across it, spirals a dark orange tint spiraling up to the tip, and on the tag it said seal. Breathing heavily, Naruto sat down and looked up, annoyed. Happy now, can I get an explanation for a few things? 1. What the hell do you mean by the ears comments? 2. Is there anything you can teach me? You gave me a freaking sword after all, you have to know some cool stuff. And 3. Explain what this favor of yours is. After shouting he laid back and stared at the sky, almost swearing it was real if he hadn't just created it. Ayubi coughed slightly, looking around in slight wonder. After living in a sewer for the past 12 years of his life, something like this was a welcome change. It looked slightly familiar though. An. Foreshadowing, shaking his head the Kyuubi looked down at Naruto and decided to explain his parts first. The brat deserved that much due to the sudden change. Still, everything came with a price, this information was simply paid for in advance. Your father's seal has some side effects. Well, the seal was made to slowly assimilate my chakra to yours, it is also draining my yakai into you. Very well, making you into a hanyo, and if the process continues, the new Kyuubi. In its very essence, this seal is making you into a demon and stripping me of my power. Growling at the part, the demon lord gave a shocked Minato a glare. My favor has been undecided. I would like to keep a portion of my power, but I also desire revenge on a certain bastard Uchiha for using his twice damned Sharingan on me. Minato paused slightly in his shock. He had wanted for his son to have a great weapon to protect himself and the village, but he never dreamed it would actually make his son a demon. Trying to push past this, the fourth looked blearily at the demon and asked. What Uchiha and why do you wish revenge exactly? He is the very reason I was attacking. I only realized it after being sealed that the bastard had used some sort of genjutsu on me. I believe his name is Uchiha Madara, and he made it seem as if Konoha had stolen my maid away and killed my kids. Due to the genjutsu forced scene, when I returned to my den of a battle and bloody corpses, bearing the Konoha insignia. The whole time the demon spoke, his eyes bled more and more crimson, until they were glowing. His tails thrashed behind him in anger, making Minato edge away from the demon slightly. Suddenly a voice broke out and startled them both. I'll give you both. The age-old demon turned to Naruto in shock, not quite believing he had heard right. I'll try and track down the guy who had put the genjutsu up and let you keep half your power. In disbelief, the Kyuubi simply uttered out. Why would you do that? Well, the guy who forced that on you, he killed a lot of people in doing so, and he also tore apart a familion that simply goes against my nindo. The power part, well, I'm going to surpass everyone on my own power, and my power coupled with half of yours, well, that'll be enough to pass you in your prime easy. Naruto replied from his lying position on the ground, a cocky smirk on his visage. Kyuubi couldn't help it, he laughed. He laughed long and hard until slight tears threatened to fall. Kid, that's some tough talk, can you back it up? Damn straight I can. I am Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto, and I swear on my being that I will surpass everyone in thing and honor my nindo. I give you my word that I shall honor these promises I have said to you to the best of my ability. Though I'll have to learn about seals though, Naruto said, trying to think of how he could get the Kyuubi to keep half of his power. Minato blinked and finally said. I'll add that to my training regimen then. Naruto opened his eyes, blinking up at his father's visage, though the boy still hadn't fully accepted him as such. Training. You asked if I could train you, and since we're here for a week, I'll make the most of it. We'll be training you in sealing, both of my signature jutsu, one of those being the Hirshin, our family's true bloodline, and of course our family Taijutsu. Minato said, smiling down at his son. Naruto slowly started to grin at the sound of this, and paused for a moment before blinking and glaring suspiciously. What about sword techniques? You gave me a freaking sword after all. Minato laughed sheepishly and said. I never put any sword in with the scroll. No sword, but I saw it. It had a red sheath with a black dragon wrapping around it, the hilt was wrapped in some silky looking red cloth and had this weird purple rock in the hilt of it. Kinda looked like a diamond actually, Naruto muttered, trying to recall the blade he had only glimpsed before. Minato's eyes widened at the description before glossing over the emotion of a deep sadness hidden in the dark blue orbs. If that blade was in with his scroll, it meant only one thing. Something had happened to Kushina-chan. So that was why Naruto grew up without a mother. Slowly and sadly Minato explained to his son. That was your mother's gift to you. Actually, that sword is an heirloom. It said the true heir who would restore the clan to its former glory would be the only one to pull it from its sheath. You see, the Uzumaki clan was slowly falling when I was alive. Actually, your mother was one of the 20 Uzumaki still alive. I'm not sure if any are left, but your mother was from the main branch of the clan and as such passed the sword to her heir, you. I must mean your mother is passed on as well. I'm sorry, Naruto-kun. Naruto blinked and sighed. Sadly, he kind of expected it, at least this was better than her abandoning him. Shaking his head from his sad thoughts, Naruto nodded. Alright then. I'll just keep trying my own sword style then. When do we start training? Now. So the training progressed. For 3 days straight Minato trained Naruto without rest in each of his specialized areas. The first day was solely devoted to training in the family training style, the flashing palm. It was as fast as the iron fist while as fluid and flexible as the Hyuga's gentle fist. The taijutsu was dedicated to getting inside one's guard quickly and aiming for pressure points and the body's naturally weaknesses, such as the back of the knees, and at muscle points, such as the elbows or any bending joints. It relied heavily on speed and precision. For the first few hours they went through the basic beginner kata, developing muscle memory. When Naruto asked why weren't they working on conditioning, his father replied that any of that they did in here would not go through to the outside, but the things like muscle memory and chakra could be dealt with here and carried out into the rest of the body upon his awakening. So the day progressed, going through the kata and slowly ingraining it into his mind, while Minato attempted to write scrolls that Naruto could study from for the advanced kata that he had gotten his son to create. For these he used Kyuubi's help. Due to the demon being something inside his son, it could hold things for him. Unfortunately, the Kyuubi had to be appeased first. Oddly enough though, it wanted a rematch. The fight that took place was something of legend. While Kyuubi was in human form, it was still a battle that people would talk of for ages, if anyone ever saw it. Sadly though, only Naruto was there to witness it. This took almost the rest of the day, and by the time they finished it was a draw due to the constant tearing of the landscape, actually giving the Namikaze a migraine. Kyuubi was satisfied though, and consented to keeping any scrolls the Namikaze had to pass down to Naruto when he was ready for them, and only when the demon deemed him ready. Immediately after the training, giving a few hours for Naruto's migraine to pass, they trained in sealing. This was Minato's forte, and enthusiastically the man started training his son in his favorite art. Soon enough the swordsman was enthralled at all the different uses for seals, especially when he heard they could be used on weapons to give them different added effects. They started off simple, with seals used for sensory and alarm seals, so when Naruto set up a camp, they had an early warning to anything crossing into the perimeter. Slowly they worked up, only when Naruto could flawlessly write and enforce one of the seals he had been previously shown. Thus leading the blonde to being frustrated at the sheer perfection he had to have for it to work. While Naruto was working on his penmanship, Minato was once more writing down scrolls that he had his son create. The information slowly built up to all he could summarize into a scroll, leaving quite a vast library for sealing. As a precaution he decided that the Kyuubi would not let Naruto have access to these until he had trained under the Toad-san and Jiraiya if possible. If it wasn't, then Naruto was to seek training from someone else with seal knowledge, someone to look over his shoulder so he wouldn't screw up and accidentally blow himself up or something else. With Naruto getting to medium-level seals, Minato decided that they would call it for those at the halfway mark and start on the one special seal the blonde would need. The seal adapted to him for him to use the Hirshin effortlessly. This led to a conversation starting up on said bloodline. Naruto groaned, rubbing his temples at the sheer amount of frustration that the seals had been giving him. Now he was supposed to learn one that would be inscribed for his use of Hirshin. He had used it before without one, why couldn't he do it again? Wondering this, he decided to voice his opinion out loud. Minato smiled slightly. Tell me Naruto-kun, what exactly happened when you used it last time? Naruto blinked and thought back slightly. Well, I was running and really needed to get where I needed to go. Then I felt my chakra throw me there kind of, and then I was in front of Haku. Minato nodded slightly and proceeded in his questioning. Did you notice anything else about it afterward? Scrunching his brow in thought, he tried to recall everything that happened before he blacked out. Well, it took a lot of chakra, which is weird because usually I don't feel jutsu effects like that unless I use a lot of them really fast, and I was really sore all over, like cut up and stuff. Minato nodded, smiling. This is because you use the jutsu without a focus. See, our blood limit needs a focus to be used, for it sends our chakra ahead of us, uses it almost like a reverse summoning, but different. It increases our speed so fast that our atomic structure is in danger. Especially if we have no focus against air pressure. You see, the seal will focus your chakra to push air out ahead of you, enacting an instant teleportation, and it homes in on wherever your chakra is specifically. It also cuts down on the chakra used since it focuses on a single point instead of a general area. This is the reason that I was known as the Yellow Flash instead of a part of a clan of Yellow Flashes. Naruto blinked in wonder, realizing just how complex their blood limit was. Smiling slightly he nodded, determined to get this down. If he had this seal he would be amazing on the battlefield. One condition to teaching you this though, you're not allowed to use it until the Chunin exam. Minato declared. Naruto's eyes widened in indignation. What? Why? He sputtered, wanting to show off and be able to kick everyone's asses in a flash of power. Minato shook his head. Some things are better kept secret. This is one of those. Still, if you agree to this, then I'll let you use my other signature move before then. Grumbling, Naruto glared at him. Yeah, so what? I bet it isn't as cool as the Hirshin. Minato smirked and held up a hand, a blue sphere swirling in it effortlessly. Naruto raised an eyebrow, skeptical. Minato simply smirked more before turning and thrusting the swirling sphere of destruction into a tree trunk. The trunk blew back in a flash of power, turning the trunk of the tree into sawdust. Naruto's eyes widened before he grinned. Deal. And so the training began, in the Hiroshin seal in the beginning, and then proceeding to try and using it after Minato managed to adapt to his son's signature. They then had Naruto practice writing the seal until he could do it without error. Needless to say that they didn't get around to using the Hiroshin at all in the second day. As the third day came up, Naruto started training in the use of the Rasengan. It was slow work until Naruto finally had the delayed idea of what he could use to help. So instead of training in the Rasengan, they first trained in the Kage Bushin. Naruto was quick to point out that he already knew a technique like that already. Minato simply said not exactly and continued to teach his son, promising this would be worth it. Amazingly enough, the boy had the jutsu down in an hour. Minato proceeded to have him summon a clone and then proceeded to take the clone a distance away. He then told him a specific sentence and grinned when he heard the yell of "I am not." Minato reappeared and grinned. "How do you know what I said?" Naruto raised his finger and pointed before his eyes widened as he realized his clone knew it. "So it, whatever they know I know." Minato nodded and Naruto proceeded to grin. With this he had his own scouts and his studies would increase tenfold. Proceeding to summon as many as he could, he watched as the clearing was filled with himself. Blinking in surprise, Minato rolled his eyes and made him decrease it to a group of 100. He then proceeded to have them all work on writing simultaneously. When they were all finished, Naruto grinned and dispelled them all at once before he could be stopped, proceeding to be knocked out from the information overload. Sighing, Minato decided the fourth day would be used for resting. Halfway through the fourth day, Naruto woke up, blinking at the sky before him. Looking around, he winced and held his head, having a slight migraine still. Apparently releasing so many clones at once was a bit of a bad idea. Shaking his head, he looked to where his father was sitting and blinked, seeing the man staring up through the leaves of a tree as he leaned against the trunk of it. Frowning with a sigh, Naruto realized he hadn't been acting very grateful, he hadn't even tried to learn of his father. Shaking his head, the boy walked over before sitting next to him, startling the fourth out of whatever thoughts he had been previously stuck in. Sitting next to him, the blonde looked into the sky and asked quietly. "Hated. What was mom like?" The Namikaze was startled by the sudden title before grinning widely, placing a hand on top of his son's head and ruffling his hair. "Your mother was a pain in the ass, she was loud, she took everything as a challenge and loved to have her way. She constantly bossed everyone around and loved to fight, but that's why I loved her. She kept me in check when my head grew too big." Looking at his son, he smiled. "You're a lot like her, she always kept her promises too and she trained all the time too. She actually asked me out for a date before I could ask her, it was quite funny." Naruto grinned slightly and asked. "So mom wore the pants in the relationship?" Minato knocked his son lightly in the head and laughed. "Maybe she did, but your old man can still take you down, boy." A day proceeded with the two catching up, acting like a true father and son, and acknowledging the relationship. The rest of the days passed with them repeating going over the taijutsu and seals, slowly increasing his knowledge with each covering of it. Slowly the days passed by and suddenly before they knew it, the last day was before them. They could tell things were changing, Minato seemed to be fading ever so slightly, and Minato couldn't help but feel sad and happy at the same time, knowing his son had grown up well even without him there. Naruto stood before his fading father, tears threatening to spill. Now that he had gotten him, he didn't want him to just go. Grabbing his hand, he tried to keep his emotions in but was failing. Minato placed a hand on his head and kneeled down next to him. "Be strong, Naruto-kun. We knew this was going to happen, so it doesn't mean I have to like it," Naruto said, tears slightly starting to flow. Minato smiled sadly, knowing his presence was fading fast. Closing his son in a hug, he quietly said his last piece. "Look, Naruto. I want you to try and find Jiraiya-sama, tell him he owes you some seal training and a summoning contract for his neglect of his duties." Naruto tried to speak and Minato silenced him by a stronger hug. "Shh, listen. I'm fading fast now. Look, whatever happens, know I am proud of you and will always love you. Now tell me, before I fade. I've been wanting to hear your nindo." Naruto smiled sadly too, crying freely now. "My nindo is to stand up for anyone and everyone and to be the protector of everyone. I will always keep a promise and I will be the protector of anyone who needs it. The only thing that can stop me from being the Hokage will be if the village is destroyed and then I'll start my own village." Unfortunately for the blonde, his words may come very close to his exact words. A single tear rolled down the man's cheek as he hugged his son once more before smiling. "Both me and your mother are proud, just remember, no matter that always." As the man vanished, the mind world dissolved and Naruto's eyes truly opened, tears streaming from them as he awoke to the sound of someone shouting. He woke up, his father's final words replaying over and over again in his mind. Looking around quickly, Naruto blinked when he saw that for the moment the room was empty. This was the first time in 2 hours it had been empty. Ever since he had woken up, there had been people checking him over, asking what had happened, and poking him with weird objects and needles full of stuff. After a while he had simply lost track of what was going on in the blur of motion, thinking of the week with his father. Sighing, the Uzumaki looked down at all the things he was connected to and smiled slightly. It was time for another grand Uzumaki escape. He hadn't actually pulled one off in a few months, and Konoha hadn't had one since he had been chased by mobs when he was young. It was definitely time for one by his standards. Creating a shadow clone with ease, the swordsman nodded to it and the clone smirked, switching the machine monitoring his vitals off. When that was done with, Naruto instantly ripped the various plugs and items off his body and gestured for the clone to take his place in the bed. As he was being replaced, the blonde grabbed a pair of scrubs to replace the clothing that was not there for him. A quick henge for his hair and a surgical mask to cover up his cheeks, since for whatever reason he couldn't henge those, and the Uzumaki looked to be an intern, be it an extremely short one. Turning to his clone, he held out his arms in a "how do I look" fashion. Frowning, the clone smiled and said, "Perfect." Nodding, the Uzumaki said, "You should last for a few hours, but if no brow sensei gets here, dispel yourself immediately. I don't want him dispelling you, the memories would be kind of painful." The clone nodded, and with that Naruto started walking out the door. No one even noticed his presence as he kept walking. For good measure, the teen grabbed a random empty clipboard off a counter as he passed it. Soon he was on the first floor and was only a few steps from escape. Mentally giving himself a pat on the back for an escape well done, Naruto was about to walk out when two separate hands clapped down on his shoulder in a steel grip. Freezing immediately at the touch, Naruto slowly turned his head and saw the creepily happy visage of Haku and the not so happy, more glaring visage of his sensei. Behind them, Jace waved at him and the Hokage simply was looking amused. Looking to the two before him, Naruto decided to go to plan B, aptly labeled plan. Make up random things to save your ass. Haku-chan. Sensei, what a surprise. I was just going to go look for you since I'm up now. Naruto shouted happily, smiling nervously under his mask. Then why do you have on surgical scrubs and a mask, brat? Zabuza asked. Sounding menacing but busting a gut mentally. Oh, these? I thought I woke up and it was Halloween. So you know, I figured I'd grab the first costume I found. Halfway across Konoha, a similar masked scarecrow smiled happily, sensing another person had joined him on his reign of lame excuses. Unfortunately for Naruto, this did not make Haku giggle or react happily at all. No, if there was one thing Haku did not like, it was when Zabuza or Naruto tried to get out of resting when sick or injured. Suddenly her killing intent spiked and she said in a sweet voice that literally made Naruto sweat buckets, "Well, you found us, Naruto-kun. How about we go back to your room so the doctors know where you are now?" Nodding quickly, Naruto practically sprinted ahead of the group, distinctly hearing the laughter of his second teammate and the Hokage behind him as he rushed through the halls. A few minutes later showed Naruto sitting on the edge of his bed with everyone in the room, all but Haku and of course Naruto still thoroughly amused. Finally it was the Hokage who broke the silence. Coughing into his hand, the aged Sarutobi looked to the blonde and asked the prize-winning question. "What happened to you, Naruto?" The blonde blinked and smiled. "Oh, I met my dad." Seeing the shocked looks, Naruto went on to explain the principles behind the memory seal and everything that went along with it. When he finished that, he explained some of what he went through with his dad, leaving a good part of it out since his father had told him to keep the Hirsahin training a secret from everyone. When he came to the part of the sword, Naruto paused and then looked to the Hokage. "Do you have it with you?" "Unfortunately no, but after you're cleared we can all go to my office. I assume it's a family matter after all," Sarutobi said with a slight smile, as if knowing something the other boy didn't. Naruto blinked and frowned, raising an eyebrow at the aged Hokage. After a minute, Naruto sighed and shook his head. "Alright, I give. What's with the way you worded that?" Sarutobi simply smiled slightly and reached inside his robe, bringing out a pipe. Placing it to his lips, the third placed some tobacco slowly in it, annoying the blonde further. Finally he was done, and he looked to the swordsman who was developing a slow eye twitch at waiting. "Well, simply put. You're not the only Uzumaki here," the Sandium said with a wry smile. Naruto paused for a moment before sharply eyeing the old man. "Explain." "Well, the council was not too thrilled to have you back and even less so to have your comrades here in the village," the Hokage said, which to Naruto the double meaning was clear. They were reluctant to accept the demon, but there was no way in hell they wanted more demon lovers in their village. Biting back a few choice swear words, he waited for the Hokage to continue. "It took a few quick maneuvers and a small white lie, but I managed to convince them that they had taken part in a certain clan ritual all clans have and that you were already a citizen and shinobi of Konoha. In other words, we're all one big happy family," Jace shouted, being the first one in the room to talk since the two had begun the conversation, also effectively ruining the serious atmosphere. Naruto blinked, giving them a slightly shell-shocked look before shaking his head and snickering. Soon the snickering had turned into a full-blown laugh and everyone began to worry about the boy's sanity. Soon it started to die down and the teen wiped a bit at his eyes. So much has happened in 2 weeks. My dad's the fourth, I have a compound, and now you guys are by law family. All that's left is for me to become Hokage tomorrow and everything's set. Naruto shouted with a grin. Everyone gave varying smiles, except for Zabuza who even though he was smirking still looked bored. The Hokage coughed slightly into his hand, blowing out a wisp of smoke. I don't believe you'll have my job just yet. Whatever old man, just get me out of this hospital. 2 days passed with Naruto stuck bored out of his mind. He tried 2 more escape attempts before Haku struck her point home by disabling his legs with Senbon. After that the blonde played ball and stayed put. Finally the 3rd day came and the missing nin turned genin was let out. Immediately the first thing he did was race to the Hokage's office, not even stopping when the Chunin shouted something about him being in a meeting. Kicking open the door, Naruto was about to announce himself when he blinked and saw Jace and the Hokage conversing. Both turned to look at him, the old man looking at ease, while Naruto caught his what was he, a cousin? Brother? Family member, passed something through his eyes before a smile was plastered up. Taking it as nothing Naruto plopped down next to Jace and quickly said. Hope I'm not interrupting. Only a bit, Naruto-kun. I was conversing with Jace about his interesting past with Kiri before he became a missing nin. The Hokage said in an amused tone. Naruto threw Jace a curious look while the black and white-haired teen shot the Hokage a look. Naruto found this even more interesting since in all the time he was with Jace, he had never seen the other swordsman do something that looked actually serious. Hell, even when he was fighting he made it look like a giant joke. Really? I wanna hear. Naruto grinned and Jace sighed. The Hokage sensed his uncomfortable stance and quickly said. Maybe when Jace wishes to explain himself. Was there something you wanted? Naruto blinked slightly before suddenly nodding. Right, where's my sword? He was already grinning in anticipation. Sarutobi simply rolled his eyes before opening a drawer in his desk and pulling out a scroll. With a quick movement the scroll was open and the sword was out on the desk. Naruto wasted no time and seeing if the prophecy was the hilt of the blade, he pulled it as quick as he could and grinned as it started to move before something weird happened and the hilt gave a pulse like it was alive before. To his shock, he was blasted away into the wall. The Hokage was next to the blonde in a second while Jace looked curiously at the blade on the desk. What was that? Naruto groaned as he shook the spots from his vision. The Hokage was about to reply when he saw Jace grab the blade with a look of wonder on his face. Jace, don't do before he could finish the sentence, Jace pulled on the hilt. Immediately there was what looked like a flash tag going off and Jace was struggling to keep himself where he was. Both the Hokage and Naruto watched in slight wonder as Jace's clothes flew around him as if a large gust was blowing him back. His feet, stuck to the ground with chakra, slowly started moving back and then with a cry the boy slammed it shut, only getting it half open. Immediately he dropped the sword, shaking what looked to be burned hands as he fell to one knee panting and sweating. It's sentient. Jace exclaimed, his voice lacking its usual idiotic bounce in it, only showing surprise. Looking up to Naruto, he grabbed the sheath and threw it to the blonde. Cut your thumb, place it on the end of the hilt. Then channel some of your chakra into it and try to pull it. Naruto gave the older teen a look that shouted he was crazy before Jace just sighed and said. Do you want an awesome sword like some of the 7 swordsmen or what? Eyes widening at the sound of that, Naruto grinned and complied, biting his thumb and placing it on the head of the hilt. Sarutobi and Jace watched in wonder as the sword seemed to absorb the blood and move a bit before Naruto powered some of his chakra into it. This time they knew for sure the sword moved as it jerked in the blonde hand as he pulled the hilt. With a flash of light the blade pulled free, revealing a beautiful black-looking steel with kanji written in gold across it. Shining Shadow. A bit odd for a sword name as if in repulse to his words the sword jerked away from the blonde, almost out of his grip. Okay. Sorry. He said in shock and the sword stopped moving. When it finished moving they all got a look at it. Instead of a normal single edge it had 2 razor-sharp looking edges, it seemed to widen towards the top before slating towards the middle, meeting at a sharp point. Grinning the Uzumaki twirled the blade before sliding it into its hilt. Thanks. I'm gonna go train some, bye. Before either of the occupants could react the blonde was gone, leaving a stupefied Jace and Sarutobi to react at how fast all that happened. He certainly livens things up. Sarutobi said with a chuckle, and Jace could only nod. It was 2 weeks later and Zabuza was standing before his 3 genin, all of them looking tired even though it was only noon. It had been another one of their group training, which had started the day Zabuza learned Naruto was out of the hospital. The 3 genin decided to call it torture sessions. They started at 5, taking a full-on 2-lap spring around Konoha with Zabuza behind them, swinging his horse cleaver if they even thought about slowing down. After that they got a 5-minute rest before practicing chakra control, which consisted of them standing on a lake of water while having a leaf stuck on their head using chakra while Zabuza threw kunai, shuriken, and the occasional water dragon at them. Falling in or losing the leaf resulted in another 3 laps for all of them. Then an hour was spent on individual training, Zabuza helping out when needed as they either sparred each other to increase speed and focus with Haku and Jace, or whatever Naruto was doing at the time, which was usually a form of training he went through with his father, usually perfecting the Rasengan or working on seals. Either one usually had 50 Narutos on the field doing the same thing. This was different though, since instead of dispelling them all at once, the Uzumaki came up with the idea of finding the clones who had gotten the farthest and dispelling the top 2 every 20 minutes, resulting in all the clones steadily getting better and quadrupling the experience. After that they had a 3-on-1 spar against Zabuza, limited only to Taijutsu and Kinjutsu. Needless to say they had just finished losing the spar. Naruto was for some reason hanging from a tree branch by his shirt, his own 2 swords pinning his legs to the tree through the cloth of his pants. Jace was planted upside down, his legs in the air, in a crater. While Haku was on her back, dirty and torn, but looking much better than Jace and Naruto. Zabuza smirked before commenting. "Alright maggots, up and at attention. I've got a discussion topic for you." Slowly the genin assembled themselves in front of him. Jace crawling from the crater and getting up while Haku simply pushed herself up in front of him. Naruto had a bit more trouble, having to unpin his sword from his pants. Unfortunately in doing that, the branch holding his shirt couldn't take the weight. So with a yell the blonde painfully met the ground, a branch slamming him on the back of the head. Zabuza snickered as Naruto glared at him, throwing himself off the ground and walking over, catching a second wind already. "Haha, what the hell do you want to talk about, no brow sensei?" That comment earned him another meeting with the ground via Zabuza's fist. Looking to the other genin, Zabuza started with a question. "Alright, you know the Chunin exams are in 3 months, correct?" The 2 genin nodded while Naruto groaned into the dirt, to which Zabuza took as an agreeing remark. "Well, do you want to enter in?" Haku blinked before looking to her teammates. Jace seemed to be staring at a passing cloud while Naruto was getting to his feet, looking down so she couldn't see his face. Suddenly with a slow laugh the blonde looked at their sensei with grin and a fiery determination. "What kind of idiotic question is that?" "Of course we are." Zabuza raised a non-existent eyebrow, looking to the other 2. Haku nodded slowly, still looking at the Uzumaki, and Jace waved a hand. "I vote with the shrimp. The sooner we get Chunin, the sooner we can stop chasing that kitty, though I kinda like watching shrimp get mauled by it every time." This earned him a glare and a giggle. Zabuza nodded, figuring that was the answer he was going to get beforehand. "Alright then, we need to go to the Hokage for a mission then." This got a group groan. "Not another D rank. I'm tired of these stupid chores," Naruto muttered. Zabuza smirked and started walking towards the tower. "You're in luck then, we're grabbing a C rank. Now come on before I decided to wait a month." Needless to say the 3 were on his heels in a second. The Hokage raised an eyebrow at the odd request. "A C rank already?" Deciding to voice his thoughts, he let out. "Are you sure you're ready for one so soon? You've only been here close to a month." Zabuza nodded, sounding professional. "Well, my team has been official Konoha shinobi for only a short time, we have been living a shinobi lifestyle for much longer. We need a single C rank to meet the requirements of joining the Chunin exam coming up soon, and I wish for my team to enter." Sarutobi nodded slightly, hearing what the man was getting at. "I see, alright, let me see what I have here for you." The genin looked a bit more excited to see this and were watching the Hokage shift through scrolls alertly, but keeping a professional stance behind Zabuza, seeing as there were others in the room, namely parts of the council. Zabuza had told them the best way to get them to lay off was act like shinobi, so they took his advice. None of them liked the annoyance of them on their every step after all. "This one might do, it's reconnaissance and information gathering. We've found what looks to be an abandoned base of some sort close to Hai no Kuni's border. I want you 3 to investigate it and see if you can find any information from it. At most I believe there should only be some bandits taking refuge in it." Immediately Haku and Naruto saluted. "Hi Hokage-sama." A few moments later they realized the 3rd genin of the team hadn't saluted and looked towards the swordsman. What they saw surprised them. Jace was glaring sharply at the scroll in the Hokage's hand, his killer intent flaring briefly. "Hokage-sama, may I request a different mission?" His voice surprised them more, instead of the usual loud and innocent sounding one there was a sound of cold professionalism. "I'm sorry, but it's this or nothing. New C ranks don't come in until next week when we collect the requests." Sarutobi knew this was going to be a sore spot, but it was better to address this fast anyway. Zabuza seemed to know too as he sent the boy a look. "We'll take it." Immediately cold grey eyes snapped to Zabuza's and the former Miss Swordsman didn't even blink. "You want to hold your teammates back?" Jace closed his eyes and said nothing, simply standing at attention and ignoring the shocked looks of his teammates. Zabuza sighed inwardly, this was gonna be a long emo-tastic trip. Goody. "Team, meet up at the gate at 0600 hours tomorrow morning prepared for a 3-week trip." Dismissed. Immediately Jace was gone, leaving the other 2 surprised. Quickly they were after him, aiming to get to the bottom of his behavior. Little did they know they were going to find out just how little about their teammate they really knew. The Namikaze estate was silent, save for the sound of a window creaking open and a soft thump as a person entered through it. Slowly there was a follow-up click before there was a sudden and very loud bang, accompanied by the sound of wood splintering. The results of all these sounds was one now dubbed Uzumaki Jace, his eyes shadowed by his monochrome hair, as his fist was still in the small crater made in the wooden wall of his room. A trickle of light revealed a tear running down the boy's face before dampening the floor some as it dropped from his chin. In his head memories flash, one especially hitting him the hardest, though it was only at the front of his mind for a brief moment. Two people under a starlight training ground by a huge lake, a male and female. One was obviously a younger version of Jace, his usual black attire and swords minus the trench coat and slashed headband, instead of full-fledged Kiri headband. Before him was a girl, around 5'3" with her black hair tied up in a spiky bun. She was wearing a black sleeveless shirt with metal fishnet mesh covering the slightly revealed stomach and her arms, simple grey shorts with bandages going down the legs to hit the grey shinobi cut boots she wore. In her hand was Jace's as she slowly brought it up to place it on her cheek. On her face was a soft smile, almost breakable from Jace's view as she quietly asked one sentence that at the time he wished he had answered. There will be plenty of other girls for you if you choose someone else, do you really think you can forsake them all for me? Violently Jace shoved the thought to the back of his mind, lifting his fist back once more to slam it into the wall again. Before it could connect though, a hand grasped his arm and a voice broke his concentration. "Hey. Stop breaking my hose, will ya?" Naruto exclaimed as he held back his teammate's arm from making another small crater in his wall. Behind him Haku closed the door they had entered through and looked to Naruto and Jace with concern and curiosity shining in her brown eyes. Cursing himself mentally for not hearing them get to the house, Jace pulled his arm away from Naruto and smiled wide, wiping his eyes quickly and replying. "I was testing the wall. Very sturdy house." Naruto simply gave him a deadpan expression. "You really think I'm that stupid?" Haku sighed and placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder. When it came to conversations like this the blonde honestly had no tact. "Jace, you don't have to do this. We're teammates and better yet, you're friends and family. You don't have to hide things from us." Jace smiled from Naruto to Haku and raised an eyebrow. "Hiding? I'm not hiding," and before he could finish he felt a force hit his face and suddenly he was against the wall he was previously punching, a hand gripping the collar of his shirt. Looking down he saw Naruto glaring him full in the face. "Don't give us that bullshit. You know our damn pasts aren't rainbows and sunshine, so what makes you think we'll see you any different for yours? If you don't want to tell us, then say you'll tell us later or maybe another time, but don't lie straight to us, don't screw with our trust like that." Letting go of his shirt the blonde huffed and turned away as behind him Haku placed a hand over her eyes and sighed. Absolutely no tact at all. Jace looked at the two from his position half slumped against a wall. Looking between the two, Jace realized just how unfair he was being, but his past wasn't something he liked talking about. Then again neither did they, and yet he knew both of their pasts. Sighing he slid the rest of the way down the wall and placed his arms on his knees, his hands hanging limply in front of him. "You really want to know? If you're willing to tell us." Haku said softly, a hand over Naruto's mouth before he could say something stupid. "Sit down, I'll give you a brief rundown," then Jace muttered, refusing to look at either of them, instead opting to stare at the ceiling above him. Quickly the two arranged themselves, both sitting on the bed across from the elder teen. Looking at him expectantly, Jace finally glanced their way and closed his eyes. "You know the bloodline purge of Kiri already. Well, what you didn't know was that the Mizukage kept some of the clans that were loyal to him. My clan, the Valen clan, was one of these clans. You see our bloodline revolves around these." With a slow movement he unsheathed his sword and then held up the topaz stone on his belt. "My clan has developed a special kind of metal that works well and conducts the chakra that gets sent through these. He indicated the stone once more. These stones, for whatever reason, have only worked with our chakra, transferring the pure chakra we channel through it into elemental chakra based on the stone. When you're 8, you get placed in a room full of these stones, and sometimes you get 1 or 2 to react, or none at all. I was declared a clan prodigy because I got all the elemental stones to react." The way he spat out the word prodigy was as if he had tasted something vile. "Because of this, I was trained a lot earlier than usual. I was told I was special, more valuable than most. I grew arrogant. Still, I trained up the ranks easily, and by the time I was genin for Kiri, I was considered special Chunin in Taijutsu and my sword wielding. I passed the genin test by killing a clan member before the Mizukage." At this Naruto blinked in surprise, which was growing from the tired and seemingly sad tone Jace spoke in. It was still odd to hear him speak differently from his energetic ball of annoyingness. Haku herself gasped. "Yeah, sick. The thing is though, the way I was brought up I thought the guy deserved to die because he was inferior to me. Letting out a cold lifeless laugh, Jace closed his eyes. I was such a fool. Haku was about to say something, probably to comfort him, but Jace held up a hand. Wait until I'm done, or I won't be able to finish. Closing her mouth, Haku slowly nodded, and Jace sighed. Anyway, I was assigned to a team with a Jounin sensei. We got along fine, I guess. My male teammate, Toshiro, was a clown through and through. Somehow he managed to sometimes get me of all people to smile then, and the other was a female kid. Softly he whispered the name before closing his eyes and shaking his head. She was my equal in a lot of things, my better in others. We almost had a relationship going. Then the incident that turned me from Kiri happened. Haku and Naruto seemed to lean forward a bit, curiously wondering what could have happened, and Jace opened his eyes, looking them straight in the eye. Both blinked in shock, the normally veiled and happy eyes were filled with anger, sorrow and pain, all rolled in one. The Mizukage apparently got tired of having the Valen clan around, or maybe he was afraid of how fast I was progressing. Either way, he decided it was time for me to go. So he gave my team a C rank early, which was actually a rank investigation of an almost inactive base for an unknown organization. We were supposed to gather any intel we could and report back. I could go very detailed into the mission, but that would be pointless since we don't have that kind of time. We managed to get in and were looking around before some kind of trap was triggered. The walls changed somehow and suddenly we were cut off from our sensei. I decided the mission was important and kept us going instead of being smart and finding sensei, so we continued to search and found a lab of sorts with a lot of files. Toshiro got captured in a cage by messing around somehow. I'm not quite how, but apparently the cage was electrified so he was knocked unconscious. At that same time two unidentified shinobi walked in. I couldn't really see them due to these cloaks they were wearing with wide-brimmed straw hats, but they were white with a black sun rising from the bottom. I told Ki to get Toshiro out while I held them off. I lasted 5 minutes before they decided to stop playing around. Jace was leaned against a pillar, one sword in his hand, while the other was being used as a makeshift cane. There were large cuts all over him and a rather deep gash straight down his back, parallel of his spine. Breathing heavily he looked at the two shinobi before him before growling and rushing forward, intent on holding them a bit more. Lazily the shinobi seemed to move at a speed Jace could barely track, and suddenly a foot was impacting his cheek and sending him flipping over the ground, landing before his female teammate and coughing blood. Jace. Keed yelled, about to rush for him. Before she could though, one of the shinobi had grabbed her around the waist and picked her up, a swift blow to the back of her head knocking her out. The first one looked to the second who was walking forward after kicking Jace and said. We have the last of the test subjects we need since you killed the blasted Jounin. Let's get out of here. The second one seemed to look over and say in a high-pitched whining voice. But I was having fun. Leave him, he'll die when we destroy the place, the first one said, steel in his voice. The second one sighed before going to the cage and grinning. At least I want to kill this one. You know how I love emotional pain. Looking straight into Jace's eyes, the second one grinned and, his hand glowing blue and crackling, he placed it on the cage. Immediately sparks shot through Toshiro, and the boy screamed in pain before falling to the ground, smoking. Seeing the horror and pain in Jace's eye, the second one cackled before running after his retreating teammate. Swordsman. Remember the Kurager did this to you. Jace frowned at the memory and shook his head again, ignoring the concerned gazes directed his way. Keed got captured and Toshiro was killed. They left me to die with the name of I guess their group Kurager. I managed to get out before the place was brought down somehow, and a village nearby found me and took me in, treating my wounds. When I got to Kiri the civil war was in full swing, and apparently my clan was one of the first casualties. I joined the resistance then with Zabuza and helped with his attack on the Mizukage who obviously failed, and after that we parted ways. There was silence after a few moments before Naruto said. Did you ever find the key chick? Haku smacked him upside the head for such a stupid question when it was answered, though by a different voice. Nope, and he probably won't since I'm betting she's dead. Zabuza said. Suddenly there were two blades held at his neck as Jace glared into the man's eyes. She isn't dead. Asadaki, she's dead and you're left trying to be the hero and save her from the bad guys by acting all happy and keeping people away from you. Zabuza said, boredly looking the team down. What about you? Wanting to kill the Mizukage to save Kiri? You think they'd take you as a cage after helping kill so many of the clans with bloodlines off one did does not atone for your sins. Jace yelled and Zabuza glared, killer intent leaking into the air. The same applies to you. Both of you stop it. Haku yelled. Fighting each other won't help anything. Jace looked back at her before sheathing his blade and walking across the room to stare out the window. Silence encompassed the room before Naruto smirked. I'll help you find the man your teammate. He said out loud. Jace turned to him incredulously. You can't be serious. We're talking about at least a rank missing in here. Naruto raised an eyebrow. So? That just means you need all the help you can get. Jace stared at the blonde before smiling slightly. Holding out his hand, Jace raised an eyebrow. I'm holding you to your word, Uzumaki. Naruto grinned and grabbed it. I don't ever go back on it, Valen. Jace shook his head. Nah, that's old, I'm in Uzumaki now. Naruto laughed out loud, heading towards the door to get ready for his own mission when a voice came from the back of his head. You're just full of promises of the impossible, aren't you? Blinking in surprise, Naruto just took in stride. You bet your ass on it, furball. I'll keep all of them too, helping you and Jace get back at the bastards of your pasts. His reply was a long laugh and a call. Then you better get strong fast, kid. No worries on that, Kyuubi, I'm gonna be the strongest of them all. Everything was blurry, like a fog that settled right before his eyes. Sounds of blades clashing and screams echoed all around, with no clear source. Explosions went off and all that could be felt was the war substance spreading from his back. Suddenly a bright flash happened and eyes as dark as night stared back, sharp and feral teeth grinned before a soft cackle echoed through his mind, seeming to come from his own thoughts themselves. I hope it was worth it for one girl. For one girl you started a war, I thank you so much. Now sleep, sleep for eternity. With that statement the clearly otherworldly being struck, and with that Uzumaki Naruto ceased to exist. Feeling a hand on his shoulder, Naruto lurched up, panting slightly with a hand already on the kunai hidden under his waker, jumped back with hands held high, and it took a few moments for the Uzumaki to remember what was going on and just who this other boy in tight spandex was. What's going on? Naruto asked Lee tiredly, admittedly not getting much sleep. Lee, seeing the danger was over apparently, flashed him a bright smile that seemed to ping with a small light, even though there was no light coming into the dark tent. I apologize for waking you, Naruto-san, but it is yours and Niji's watch. Nodding quietly with a sigh over his sleep lost, the Uzumaki slipped on his trench coat and grabbed his blade before with a yawn, moving past the rather enthusiastic and just plain weird comrade. Team 9 had shown up on the day they were heading out, a missive with the Hokage's seal, saying it was to be a joint mission. Apparently the council didn't like they were leaving the village unwatched and insisted that they had people watching, of their choosing of course. The old Hokage had come through though, deciding if they were to be watched he would have it be by his own people, and so left it in one of the most trusted people of the village, Konoha's own handsome green beast. Zabuza had been a little less than thrilled, but figured it was better than having some jackass second-guessing his orders, in his own words. The first day had been filled with the two groups more or less getting used to the other. Lee and Jace had immediately hit off well. Technically, Jace had hit it off with most of the other group it seemed, aside from Niji. The sword-wielding team could be seen either bugging the Jounin in spandex for taijutsu tips, challenging leader races or other contests, such as who could carry the most people, which ended in both getting death glared when they tried to pick up Zabuza and almost killed, and Lee winning when Jace was scared off from Guy, volunteering to be piggybacked, or chatting about pointy objects with Tenten. Naruto had mainly stuck back and chatted with Haku, trying to do his best to get her to laugh. She had apparently figured this out and made it a challenge by simply smiling politely at his antics. What broke it was when Jace, trying to get away from Guy who was adamant about a piggyback ride of youthfulness, jumped bridal style into Naruto's arms and screamed for him to mush. Naruto had of course seen this as less than hilarious, but took it as a victory regardless. The final event before bed for the blonde was his talk with Jace. Through dinner the teen had seemed more and more edgy, and the blonde, being the great friend he was, decided to find out why with the most tactful question he could pose. Looking over at Jace, Naruto raised an eyebrow. What, shoving a stick slowly up your ass? Jace raised a sage-like eyebrow and questioned back. What's your asphyxiation with sticks and asses? If I didn't know better. Shut up you jackass. Naruto muttered with a glare to which he just got a happy smile in return. Seriously, what's got you nervous though? Jace turned his uneasy gaze to the fire with a sigh. Just a feeling that this is going to go to hell once we get to the base. Naruto grinned. Bet that nothing happens and we get there to a boring empty building with musty paper. Jace tilted his head slightly before smirking. Fine, bet you we hit a crap load of trouble. If I win him I know. You gotta ask Haku on a date. The impish grin on his face as he said this made Naruto's brow twitch quickly. Why that? Naruto asked, clearly wondering the angle being played here. Cause if you two aren't forced to do this neither of you will act on anything until you're old and gray. Add that to being a ninja and it's stupid. We don't live long lives you know, Jace replied as if it were obvious. Naruto frowned in thought. He did like Haku, but he wasn't sure if it was like that. Maybe at some point it could, maybe be, but right now. Plus what if she rejected him? Well, if that happened he would just say as friends. Loophole found, Naruto grinned and nodded. Fine, if I win you gotta wear a pink spandex suit like Lee's. Jace didn't even hesitate. Done. Naruto blinked in shock before giving him an odd look. You're not even gonna question it? Nah, I can pull that look off easy. You on the other hand wouldn't stand a chance, shrimp. Jace said easily, turning his smiling gaze to the fire. Don't make me kick your ass. Naruto exclaimed. Needless to say they were both sent to bed by an angry Zabuza who had been trying to sleep, the exact words being if you idiots wake me up one more time you're sleeping tied to a tree. The two had kept a lot more quiet the rest of the night before going to be in wait for the turn on watch. Looking around Naruto found the Hyuga who had joined with them leaning against a tree with his eyes closed, his veins had a creepy bulge coming out of them before they sunk back in, and he opened his eyes. Figuring it would be better to at least get to know the person he was on watch with, Naruto walked over. "So you're really blind?" Naruto asked curiously. The Hyuga just eyed him with disdain. "Fool, do you know nothing of your own home village? I'm a Hyuga, possessor of the greatest eye technique ever known, the Byakugan." Naruto twitched at being called stupid. "You could call it the God Eye and I would still kick its ass. You look blind with it and the stick shoved up your ass doesn't help much." The Hyuga sighed. "Your vulgarity makes this conversation more pointless than it already was. If we must be on watch together, sit over there and keep watch while I do my part over here. DCH, whatever you jerk." Naruto muttered, shoving his hands in his pockets before sitting against a tree on the other side and wondering how to best keep watch. Well, if he was gonna sit here, he might as well train. Creating a few shadow clones he had learned from his father, Naruto grinned when they appeared perfectly. Apparently this retraining was working, now if he could only get all these other jutsu to work so easily. "Alright you five, spread out around the perimeter and keep watch. I don't want anything coming through while we're waiting." Naruto ordered and the clones each snapped off a salute before spreading out. With them gone, Naruto quickly began practicing working on making a one-handed Rasengan. The hours passed with Neji checking the R periodically and otherwise staring off into space, deciding whatever it was that his temporary teammate was doing, it was of no matter to him. Soon the rays of morning were showing and Naruto had only made a slight bit of progress. As soon as the morning rays hit the tent though, an unusual wake-up call ensued. "What a youthful morning, I am certainly blessed to have a mission on such a youthful day such as this. Hi, Guy-sensei. Today's morning feels especially youthful." "Yes, Lee. Today radiates youth, we shall go." Whatever was supposed to follow was cut short when Guy went flying through the tent flap via fist, with a twitching Zabuza following. "What the hell is wrong with you two?" Soon the tent with the girls in it opened and an alert and somehow already packed Tenten and Haku walked out and took down the tent before sitting on a log. Suddenly they both turned to each other, surprised the other wasn't as shocked as they thought they would be. "Loud teammates?" Tenten asked. "Hi." Haku replied quietly and both girls patted the other's back, sharing a moment of kinship in the fact that both suffered the same. Zabuza looked around, sighing as he realized everyone was already up. "Alright, due to Spandex and his mini-me, we're all up, so you have 10 minutes to break down, eat a ration bar, and we're heading out. This base is only 2 hours away, we'll make plans there." With a resounding hi, everyone hopped to work and got ready, not knowing the events that would soon follow. The group had made good time, and soon we're standing before a very large opening that leads straight down, before it seemingly branched off in 4 directions. The group all stood in wait just outside of the entrance, all looking to the two conversing jounin who were for once both being serious. Finally Zabuza turned around and grossed his arms. "Alright, this a good chance to get to know your comrade and get some experience in a mission area. Since there's 4 paths, it's teams of 2, 1 from each team and me and Spandex won't be holding your hands, so you're on your own." I nodded. "Hi, we will look for any information that could prove useful to Konoha, such as listing of what went on here, who operated it specifically and so forth. If you think it may be even remotely noteworthy, bring it with you and we shall meet up back at the entrance in 4 hours time depending on base size and searching. If you believe you have searched all you can, then report back here and wait for the other teams." Zabuza then started pointing. "Mini Spandex and Moron B, you're team 1. I want you to treat this seriously." Jay saluted sarcastically and responded. "Hi, no brow Taichu. We'll make sure not to have too much fun searching through empty and dusty rooms." Despite his casual sarcasm, Jace was inwardly nervous. The feeling he had gotten since the beginning of this mission only increasing. Turning, he pointed. "Bun Girl and Moron General A, team 2. Don't screw this one up Naruto." Naruto simply flipped him the bird while looking over at his new teammate. "Let's find some good info, nah." Tenten nodded silently, wishing she could have been paired with one of the other two she knew more about really. Neji looked over at Haku, the only close to competent one in his eyes, but no matter what they were all below him. "Just don't get in my way." Naruto glared and was barely held back from starting a fight by Jace, grabbing the back of his shirt. "Don't you speak to Haku-chan like that you piece of crap. I'll kick your ass." Haku smiled kindly and tapped Naruto on the shoulder to calm him down. "Just ignore it, don't cause trouble, Naruto-kun." With that she followed as the Hyuga started down one of the 4 paths. "Yosh. Let us find the most information and be victorious on this mission Jay-san." Lee shouted enthusiastically, looking to his teammate. "I'm not sure this is a competition, but sounds good fuzzy brows." Jay said with a grin, heading down one of the passageways with an enthusiastic Lee trailing behind him. Ondaigaki was the only word Zabuza spoke before heading down the third tunnel. Well, guy, have Tenten a thumbs up and a large grin. Yosh. Let your path be filled with youth. Tenten sighed while Naruto rolled his eyes. Senseis want to trade? Tenten asked hopefully while Naruto snorted and grinned back at her. Hell no, mine may be crazy in battle Henji, but super fuzzy brows is insane. Shaking her head, Tenten chuckled before following a humming Naruto down one of the passageways. Neji and Haku. Neji walked silently with an equally silent Haku behind him. Both were looking around the passage that seemed to lead to one specific area. Suddenly there was a clicking sound and Haku looked down with a frown as the floor she had stepped on was pushed down. Neji looked down and glanced back up. Trapped, he muttered when there was a sudden rumbling sound. Activating his Byakugan, Neji cursed. Get running, large boulder coming from behind us. He ordered. Immediately the two took off, taking corners quickly while they heard the boulder getting closer. Suddenly Neji picked up a doorway on the right and looked back. 70 meters on the right, doorway. Suddenly under him a pit opened up right before the said doorway and he was falling before a hand grasped his arm and threw him up and through. Rolling through, he cursed as he looked back to see the boulder drop to where he was falling moments ago. He was shocked that a shinobi he didn't know until moments ago would throw her life away for his. Suddenly there was a sound behind him and Neji turned, kunai in hand. To his shock, the form of Haku dropped from a mirror made completely of ice and the ice wielder shook her head. That was rather close, we need to be more careful from here out it seems. Neji nodded slowly, pocketing his kunai and keeping his limit active before another sound reached his ears, the sound of laughing. Grabbing the kunai once more, he turned his head slightly and his eyes widened in shock as his opponent appeared out of his blind spot. Too bad, it's much to pass the time of being careful. Unfortunately, since you stumbled onto our lab here, you'll be dying now. Lee and Jace. Jace held out his arm, effectively stopping Lee from moving forward. The hallway before them was lighted different it seemed, yet there wasn't a light in sight. The stone walls and floors glowed a soft blue and went on for as far as they could see. Is there a problem, Jace-san? Lee asked with a creased brow, looking out and wondering why they had stopped. There were no enemies he could see. Jace grinned slightly. Slight one, I think this hallway is trapped, let me take the first step and be ready to move quick. Nodding and crouching in a tensed movement, Lee watched as the swordsman took a light step onto the blue surface. Immediately a small hole opened in the wall and a kunai shot out with unreal force. Jace ducked backwards and whistled quietly, looking at the wickedly sharp kunai that had almost had his skull. That had almost been him. Lee looked at the team curiously. What do you propose we do? Jace grinned brightly before crouching low. Well, Lee. We do the only thing that comes to mind. And that would be? We run really fast and do some cool shinobi acrobatics to please the fans. Jace replied with a thumbs up. Lee just looked at him oddly before nodding and got prepared. On 3. Jace yelled and both took off, moving as fast as they could. Lee took lead by 2 steps immediately and both were moving down the passage using anything they could. They ducked, rolled, and used the various surfaces to rebound. As Lee passed the doorway at the end of the hallway, a metal door began sliding shut and Jace rolled just in time to get through. Jace rolled into a kneeling position and laughed as the adrenaline continued to pump through his veins. He turned to Lee, who looked back and saw Lee's eyes widened as they fell on something above him. That, accompanied with the sound of metal piercing through air, made Jace's instincts scream as he in one movement spun his sword out of the sheath and blocked the incoming kunai. Good reaction time, you blocked in time. Maybe this fight won't be so boring after all. Naruto and Tenten walked through the passage with Naruto radiating an air of casualness that made the on-guard Tenten's eye twitch. Finally, after a few minutes, Tenten finally felt that she had to say something. Shouldn't you be a little nervouser on guard? Naruto looked over his shoulder at her, his arms folded behind his neck so he could rest his hand on them. Why? Why, we're in enemy territory, in a possibly trapped base. Tenten yelled incredulously. Wrong, we're in fire country still in trapped bases. Someone's been reading stories. Why would you trap a hallway when you can trap drawers and stuff? Naruto asked in an amused sort of way when the ground before him opened up and he stepped off. With a startled yell, he began falling when he felt something move and pin his coat to the wall. Looking at the 3 kunai going through his trench coat and looking at the spikes below him, he looked up at Tenten, who had a smug smirk on her face. Placing his feet to the wall, he pumped some chakra into them and got a grip before pulling himself and the kunai free. Looking at the holes in the coat, Naruto grumbled about ruining his favorite clothes before hopping up and out the other side, to which Tenten was waiting. Don't say a damn word. The blonde muttered, moving on as Tenten followed, still smirking. The large doorway loomed before them and Tenten couldn't help herself. Hey Naruto. Huh? Told you so. Sending her a glare, he kicked open the door. As soon as he did he immediately sensed a huge chakra buildup and before Tenten could react, he had her by the waist and was rolling, pulling them both out of the way of the attack. Tenten looked and was about to yell from not seeing anything before a large slash mark made itself known across where they just stood. Damn, they managed to dodge. You're just pissed you missed, we'll get them though. Neji and Haku. Neji observed the man and heard a small gasp from his side. The expression on Haku's face faded from shock to an icy calm as she murmured one word that didn't make any sense. Possibly a group name. Identify yourself. Neji called, facing the man with a kunai out. The man dressed in a white cloak with a midnight black sun rising from the bottom. His collar was up so it blocked up to his dark gray eyes, his hair was dark navy and slicked down, looking as if it had just been drenched from a shower, and his sleeves went over his hands and seemed rather large like a monk's. Would I get stuck with a pair of genin, I hate killing kids. Tilting his head he frowned, seeming to study them before nodding slowly. I think 25% will do. In the name of Konoha I demand you identify yourself and surrender. Neji declared once more, lowering into a gentle fist stance. Ma, quiet down and just stand there. I don't want to have to hurt you too bad. Something slowly dropped from the man's open sleeve and Neji frowned at the whip before it shot out on its own without the man moving in the slightest. Rolling to the side, Neji barely dodged the whip as his Byakugan spotted the indention. The name's Van and I don't think you'll have to worry about me surrendering, you'll be dead before long. Lee and Jace. Looking over his shoulder Jace's eyes widened before they narrowed darkly. The cloak said it all for him and with a growl the Valen rolled away and drew his other blade. Kureager. The man in the cloak tilted his head, silver hair moving with it as blood-red eyes glanced at the team curiously. Toe bolts of lightning seemed to be stained under the man's eyes in blood as he regarded the shout with interest. You know of us, boy. Odd, we've made sure to keep awful quiet, leader's orders. You're the ones who took my teammate away from me. What have you done with Keed? Jace yelled, his killer intent flaring wildly as he held up his blades, ready to charge in with rage. Suddenly the man's crimson eyes widened in surprise and then settled into a look of glee as he grinned darkly. Kai haha, this is rich. That smug whore does have a living teammate who plans on rescuing her. Too bad now. What do you mean by that? She better be alive, Jace growled. Oh, she's alive boy. But you won't be seeing her, the man said smugly, twirling his twin daggers. Jace was about to charge him when he felt a hand be placed firmly on his shoulder and looked over to see it dead seriously. What's your name? It's unhonorable to fight without knowing who you face. Honor has no place on this field, we're shinobi. But I guess you can know the name off the man who will be your death. Haseo, the terror of death. Jace shook off Lee's hand and with a roar ran in, blades crackling with electricity and air. Naruto and Tenten. Naruto calmly gazed at the two across from him. They seemed to be siblings from how they stood, both had dark blonde hair and one had his spiked while the other was in pigtails. The male held his sword out and was looking at him and Tenten in annoyance, both wore the same cloaks. Kureager. What the hell are you bastards doing here? Naruto asked as Tenten shot him a strange look. Bro, he knows who we are. Think we should tell them? The pigtailed girl asked eagerly, her eyes holding an unidentifiable glint in them. Doesn't matter, they'll be dead soon, the male drawled before twirling his blade. We're supposed to be destroying this base for that Orochimaru punk who's helping us, but for some reason Haseo and Van followed along. Chances are if you got friends they're facing either that pedophile's toys or those two. Naruto nodded slowly before groaning loudly and holding his head in his hands. Crap, I lost the bet. Tenten immediately felt all the gratefulness of him helping her leave as he fist met with the back of his head. You moron. You're thinking of something so trivial as that when we're facing enemies. Naruto rubbed the back of his head and shot her a slight glare. Oi, that's important you know. Besides, I'm not worried. We'll kick their ass, get back to our crazy sensei, and head home in under an hour. The female immediately had murder in her eyes. Don't underestimate us you punk. We're gonna kill you dead. The male just smirked before pointing his blade at the Uzumaki and saying. Obviously they don't know our names. We're Sora and Ami of Kureager, or otherwise known as the Twins of Chaos. Naruto smirked faintly and took out his daikatana. Your names could be mud and dirt and it wouldn't matter, you're getting your ass kicked all the same. Jason Lee. Haseo could say one thing about this fight so far and that was the fight had been totally disappointing. At first he had expected a somewhat interesting warm-up but all this kid had done was run at him and swing recklessly. It was pathetic. With another board back step he dodged a reckless attempt on his life from a sloppy swing and ducked an obvious roundhouse towards the back of his head. You kids done yet? I'm tired of playing so if you've tired yourselves out I'll just kill you and be on my way. Haseo drawled boredly. There was no point in a fight like this, nothing to gain. He aimed for power, not to kick weakling genin around. Apparently the no-sleeved swordsman took insult to this because he charged right back in screaming. Leaning back easily, Haseo sighed and glared at the boy, snapping a kick out and catching the cheek of the teen and sending him into the arms of the lime bean. I'm done with this, playtime's over. Niji and Haku. Ban sighed as he kept backpedaling. This fight was getting to be such a drag, all he had wanted to do with this mission was to clean up after Orochimaru because as usual, the Sannin was overconfident that no one would find this oh-so-hidden base and stumble onto his geniusly encrypted notes. The good spymaster worth his salt could decrypt these notes and find this hideout in seconds if they wanted to. Seeing as how it would be bad if Kano had discovered this and learned of upcoming plans, the Kurager decided to pick up the pieces and dispose of the base, his job. Then for some reason, his meddling group mates decided they were bored since Haseo's partner was out and the twins just liked to be annoying and came to bother him on his mission. As if that wasn't bad enough, then these Konohanians just had to show up right when they were almost done. The timing was ironic and seemed to be aimed to make his life more troublesome. At least the Jounin went to the long path around the base and all they had to fight were genin, but it wouldn't be long before they came running. Deciding the easiest path was of quick disposal, Van turned and used his wipe to grab the ice user who jumped through a mirror just in time. Keeping his turning motion, he dodged a Hyuga and sighed. You're too predictable and you're in my range of divination. Niji announced with a smirk before turning and launching into a long series of strikes, to which quite a few were dodged, but some landed pinpoint on due to the shock of Niji's sudden speed increase. Haku seeing the attack went off the fly and whenever the enemy would dodge, she would attack with Senbon before suddenly the nin vanished in a pile of rocks. Both genin stared at the rocks in shock before turning towards the doorway where clapping was heard. You beat a clone, my turn. The original stated before suddenly vanishing, appearing behind the two with a whip wrapped around each of their ankles and their face hit the floor from them being pulled. Turning and pulling his arms in, the two were spun and then released to gravity, allowing them slam into walls. Time to end this pointless fight. Yosh. But this youthful fight has just begun. Naruto and Tenten, these brats don't stand still. Ami yelled in annoyance as yet another attack missed on the bun-haired girl who ducked just in time. Stand still and get hurt. What kind of shinobi would do that? Tenten asked, sending the girl a look screaming she was insane as she threw another onslaught of kunai. Sis, plans etches. Sora said as he managed to get enough distance between himself and the blonde swordsman. The female just grinned before they both vanished and reappeared next to Tenten. The girl looked shocked before she let out a planned yell and was kicked into a wall by the two. Hey. I call cheatsies. Naruto yelled out as he started speeding over to the two while Sora picked up the bun-haired girl and held a blade to her neck. Another step and the girl dies. Think you're fast enough to get here in the time it takes for me to twitch. Naruto took one more step towards her and there was loud snap followed by a yell as Ami grinned darkly. Don't forget me, too slow and I'll snap her spine next. Naruto gritted his teeth as he stared at the two. This was not good at all. Naruto, the mission comes first, go get help. I'll be fine. Tenten yelled, fighting through the pain, even though she knew there was no way she was going to live through this. She was going to go down defiant, like her idol would do. Naruto smirked before closing his eyes. You asked if I think I'm fast enough to beat a blade going down, didn't you? He suddenly had a kunai in hand and it was in the air in the opposite direction. The twins just laughed. Yeah we did, that kunai isn't going the right way if you didn't notice. You're not gonna save your little friend that way boy. Ami jeered as she got ready to break another bone. Suddenly, the moment they blinked there was a yellow flash and the boy had traveled from across the room and was right next to them, literally in the same moment. It wasn't just speed, because there was wind and speed, a displace of air, this was simply he was there one moment and over here the next. It's going the right way and yeah, I think I'm fast enough. The blonde whispered, discreetly slipping a seal onto the male of the two. He had to be lenient seeing as he only had 2 perfect seal kunai and 5 paper pieces. One was on Tenten, he had slipped one on her when he grabbed her in the entrance, the second was now on the twin. In a flash he was on the opposite wall, setting a shocked Tenten down and looking back with a slight glare at the twins. Looking back down at her he smiled confidently and put a finger to his lips. Look, the only way I can get us out alive is to make this more trouble than it's worth to the more stall for sensei. To do that I need to pull out some moves that I'm keeping top secret. Can you keep this a secret for me? He asked quietly. The girl at the moment was in more amazement than she could take. She was prepared to die a moment ago and now here was this unassuming blonde knucklehead pulling out tricks that were beyond legendary. Was that the fourths? Naruto winked and held a finger to his lips before turning on his heel to the still shocked nins who were now shaking it off. His eyes turned cold as a persona he hadn't donned in a while slipped on, his missing nin persona. Now, it's time we end this. He stated in a cool bored tone. In a flash of light Naruto was gone and between the twins once more, spinning in a clockwork fashion, he chambered a kick and slammed it into the female twin before she could react, and keeping the spinning motion at the same time he used the back of his arm to clothesline the male twin. Flipping backwards, he bounced lightly, keeping his line of sight where he could keep both in his view and rolled his shoulders. Come on, if those weak attacks did anything, then I seriously overestimated you too. Naruto drawled out before he smirked, dodging a punch from Ami by bending back slightly, letting it pass in front of him. Overextended. He said easily, slamming his palm into the elbow and snapping it like a twig. Bending his knees, Naruto crouched low under a kick and rolled forward as a kunai slammed where he was before, as Ami retaliated from her arm snapping, trying to take Naruto out as he dodged. Humming up from his roll, Naruto brought his blade up to meet the Sora's as it tried to decapitate him, stepping back so the other slipped forward, but before he could capitalize on the stumble, Ami was there sending a vicious kunai slice at him and making him have to take a small retreat, giving Sora time to recover. The twins both charged in tandem, weaving in and out of each other before increasing speed and circling Naruto, making after images start to appear around the blonde as he looked left and right, on guard as he held his blade in a defense position. Ami laughed maniacally. You think you're fast, Gaki? Come on, try and hit us. She screeched, making it come from multiple directions. She seemed surprised when the blonde closed his eyes as she kept her movement with her brother. What's wrong, giving up? She asked and was about to laugh more when suddenly the blonde shot a fist out and clotheslined her, letting out a slow breath as if in disappointment. I am the apprentice to Mamachi's abuser, your cheap parlor tricks are a simple nuisance compared to his mist. Naruto said coldly before dodging as spikes of rock jutted out from a soundless jutsu from the male. Suddenly mist started to slowly billow in from the area and a voice sounded amused. "Aw, I'm touched, brat. Just for that I might give you a head start when we begin training back at the village. Now let me take care of these two so we can get out of here." Me and Big Green and Gruesome found some research notes, so we're done here. Hi, I'll get Tenten out of here and meet up at the entrance. Naruto stated before turning and grabbing the wounded weapons mistress, turning and running out the door to the meeting point. Jason Lee. Jace grit his teeth and wiped the blood from his mouth as he panted, one eye closed as caught his second wind for a moment before he charged for once more, swinging and missing. Suddenly his eyes went wide as he coughed up blood and went flipping back, slamming against a wall and wincing hard, his vision blurring. Lee watched for only a moment, in bad shape as well before closing his eyes. I am sorry Guy-sensei, but if we are to survive I must drop the weights, Lee said quietly, hoping his teacher would forgive him before he released his weights and held them up. Haseo simply turned and raised an eyebrow. You think some weights are gonna help you, kid? Way too late for that. Haseo said with a bored look, twirling one of his twin blades and waiting for him to use his small boost in speed. That was until he saw the weights drop and make craters and his eyes narrowed. Suddenly he ducked before Lee seemed to even move and managed to dodge a punch to the head, rolling to the side and slicing at the green-clad boy, only to miss by a hair. Flipping back, Haseo smirked and shook his head. Impressive, but not enough. It matters not if it is not enough. My comrade has lost sight of his youth for fighting for comrades, so I must show him the right way. Lee shouted, his eyes burning bright before he vanished again, his fist meeting Haseo's chakra-reinforced fist before he ducked a slash at his head. Suddenly the fight was interrupted by a huge explosion, a wall falling in as another figure emerged. Haseo, we're leaving now. The Jounin rounded back and it's more trouble than it's worth to waste resources fighting them all off. The important things have been taken care of, meet at base. Ban listed off, dodging the green beast of Konoha and throwing down a flash bomb. Right. Haseo said before looking at the two and smirking. I'll remember you two for a later date and I'll be sure to spread the word around about you, swordsman. Train hard because I want a less disappointing fight next time. With that the Karager member vanished with his comrade. Lee was quick to grab his weights, sliding it back on before he rushed over to the beaten swordsman. Jason, are you alright? The grown met his question at first before Jace opened one eye and sighed. I got my ass kicked like an academy student, huh? Indeed you did, my youthful comrade, but that is because you lost the sight of your youthfulness. We must train you in keeping your emotions focused and passionate instead of angry. If you don't you will surely fall into the winter of despair. Lee yelled at his top volume, helping Haseo to his feet as Guy walked up with an aching Tenten and Niji. Yosh. You are right, Lee. We must train young Jace to see the error of his ways. Dai-sensei. Lee. Dai-sensei. Lee. Jace. Jace yelled out, immediately getting all eyes turned to him and he blinked blearily at them before shrugging. No one was yelling for me so I felt left out, he muttered before stiffly turning his neck to Guy. Can you help train me some? I know you're good into jutsu and I have an idea, plus I need help with keeping my anger controlled, Jace muttered quietly. I nodded and gave an easy nice guy pose. Yosh. We will speak more of your youthful training back in our lovely village. For now let us meet at the entrance with the others. Getting help from Lee, Jace went with everyone else to the entrance, his mind everywhere at once, but one thought bouncing through his head, making him inwardly grin. She was alive, he could still save her. I'm coming for you, I'll take down all of that damn organization, but I will save you. Entrance. Naruto sat next to Tenten as they waited for the others to come up and finish their fights. Normally Naruto would have ran back in, but he couldn't just leave Tenten here like this. Speaking of the weapons mistress, she was still staring at him, and now he was beginning to feel uncomfortable. Can I help you? He asked, finally getting tired of the awkward silence. Those moves they were. Yeah, the fourths. Look, not even sensei knows my full capabilities. I need you to keep quiet, please. The Hirishin is still in the experimental stage and takes too much chakra right now, which is why I only used it once, Naruto muttered as he stared at the ground. You changed during the fight, it was like watching a whole different person. Tenten said, trying to work out all that had happened in the short time. Yeah, well you don't spend time out with a missing nin without coming back with some quirks, just forget about that. I sense people coming. Secret, right? He asked hopefully and sighed in relief when she nodded. Looking back he smirked and waved at their sensei and the rest of the genin, who all looked like shit too. Hey guys. Nice greeting service huh? He asked before he spotted the evil glint in Jace's eye. You lost. Oh, haha. Yeah hey look. I bet we can get back before sundown if I run really fast, bye. Naruto yelled before blasting down the path. Hands on his ears as if that was gonna stop the fact the words had been spoken. Everyone turned to the wounded Jace and he smiled and tilted his head. I wanna bet. Enough said. Oh, and by the way, anyway I could get one of those nifty spandex suits in blue. Immediately the boy was on the ground before the two green beasts could respond as Zabuza shook him by his throat. You dress like that I kill you. Haku simply sighed. Zabuza-sama, you're killing him now. The rest simply looked on, not quite sure how to respond before Lee took off after Naruto declaring. I will win this youthful race, Naruto-kun.